Hello everyone, ladies and gentlemen. It's a pleasure to meet you again in today's story. Ladies and gentlemen on the channel, Darkness Prevails would like to send you a story. Now we are honored to invite you to listen to this story. Hey guys, tonight we are diving headfirst into the swirling, often confusing, and utterly fascinating world of Greek mythology, aiming to unravel what really happened, or at least what the ancient storytellers wanted us to believe really happened. Imagine the deepest, darkest part of space, but not even space. Less than that. A yawning emptiness, a cosmic sigh before the first breath. You're floating, not that there's anything to float in or on. It's the ultimate sensory deprivation tank, but without the tank. Or the water. Or you really. Just the nothing. Frankly, if you were actually there, you wouldn't just not survive it, you wouldn't even have the components to be you. It's that fundamental. So before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. Go ahead and pop your location and local time in the comments below. It's always fascinating to see where everyone's tuning in from for these late-night explorations. Now dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. This journey takes us back, way back, before, if you can picture that, to a time when not even time itself had really decided to start ticking. You're drifting in an immense, silent, and shapeless expanse. This is chaos. Not chaos in the sense of your Wi-Fi cutting out during a crucial download, or a flock of pigeons deciding your freshly washed car is the place to be. No, this is chaos with a capital, the primordial void. Imagine the ultimate untidy bedroom, but on a cosmic scale, before bedrooms or even tidiness were invented. Yeah, it was that kind of empty. It's less a thing and more an absence of things. A gaping, open mouth of nothingness. Scholars still debate whether the Greek concept of chaos primarily represented a formless void, a gaping abyss, or a disorderly pre-cosmic mixture of elements. Whatever its precise nature, it was the womb from which everything else would eventually struggle. From this yawning chasm, this unplace, the first stirrings of being begin. Picture, if you can, something substantial slowly coalescing out of the nothing. This is Gaia or Earth. She is the firm foundation, the broad-chested, ever-sure seed of all that will come to be. Suddenly, there's there. You can almost feel the shift, the sense of grounding after an eternity of featureless drift. Gaia isn't just dirt and rock. She's a conscious entity, a vast, nurturing presence. She is quite literally the mother of all, or at least most. Feel the cool solidity beneath you, the first anchor in a previously anchorless, well, everything. Almost simultaneously, or perhaps in quick succession, the ancient texts like Hesiod's Theogony, which, by the way, is one of our main historical anchor points for this whole saga, written around 700 BCE, are a bit poetic on the exact order. Other fundamental entities also emerge from chaos. There's Tartarus, a grim and shadowy realm, as far beneath the earth as the sky is above it. Think of it as the universe's supermax prison, a place of gloom and despair, deep in the cosmic basement. Then you have Erebus, the embodiment of primordial darkness, and his sister, Nyx, the brooding, powerful goddess of night. Nyx is a particularly fascinating figure. Even later, all-powerful gods like Zeus would tread carefully around her, a testament to the power of these very first beings. You can imagine Erebus and Nyx as the heavy velvet curtains that chaos draws around the nascent universe. And then, just to stir the pot, or perhaps because even primordial goo gets lonely, Eros decided to show up, the principle of desire, of procreation, of fundamental attraction. Some stories place Eros here as one of the very first beings, a raw, untamed force necessary for creation to actually get going. Because apparently, even in an empty universe, someone has to be thinking about, well, making more universe. Other traditions, particularly the Orphic ones, Talk about a cosmic egg from which fans, a being of light and generation often equated with this early Eros, burst forth. It's a quirky little detail that highlights how even the ancients had different takes on who showed up first to the cosmic party. This Eros isn't the chubby cherub with a bow and arrow you might be picturing. This is a far more ancient and powerful force, the driving urge that ensures life will indeed find a way. Now Gaia, our newly formed Earth, doesn't stay inactive for long. Perhaps feeling a bit exposed, or maybe just wanting some company that wasn't pure darkness or a cosmic pit, she produces offspring all on her own, parthenogenetically, no partner required. First, she births Uranus, the starry sky. He arches over her, a vast, glittering canopy. She literally looked up and thought, you know what this place needs? A ceiling. And bam, there he was. Talk about a self-starter. He is equal to her in expanse, covering her completely. Imagine the first sunrise, not as we know it, but the dawning of sky itself over Earth. It must have been quite the sight, if there had been anyone with eyes to see it. Then Gaia also brings forth Aria, the mountains, their stony peaks jutting proudly from her surface, giving her texture and grandeur. And Pontus, the barren, salt-swept sea, its restless waves already beginning to churn. These aren't gods with temples and elaborate rituals yet. They are the sky, the mountains, the sea. They are elemental, raw, and unimaginably powerful. You can feel the immense, almost indifferent power of these beings. They don't have complex emotions or intricate plans just yet. They simply are defining the very fabric of the nascent world. The air, if you could call it that, would feel charged, electric with the energy of creation, the smell of fresh earth, ozone, and briny sea all mingling for the very first time. So now you have a basic cosmic stage. Earth below, sky above, a dark underworld beneath, and the mysterious forces of night, darkness, and desire swirling around. It's still a pretty empty universe, relatively speaking, but it's a start. The key players are beginning to assemble. Though they might not know they're players yet, or what game they're about to be thrust into. Gaia and Uranus, Earth and Sky, are now the dominant pair. Their relationship will be, well, let's just say it's foundational in more ways than one, and it's about to get very, very complicated. The peace of this early creation, if you can even call it peace, is fragile, resting on the whims of these immense, newborn entities. The very first power couple, if you will, though couple goals might be stretching it a bit, as you'll soon see. The stage is set for the next act, the birth of new, more complex beings, and the first epic clash of divine wills. So you have Gaia, the earth, vast and nurturing, and Uranus, the sky, her equal, stretched out above her, glittering with stars. A match made in, well, pre-heaven. They get together, as primordial entities are wont to do when there's literally no one else around, and their union begins to populate this young universe. It's a period of intense creation. And it's a rather large, but Uranus isn't exactly father of the year material. Not even close. In fact, you definitely wouldn't want to be Uranus in this scenario, or any of his early kids for that matter. Their first children are memorable. First, you have the Centimanes, the Hundred-Handers. Cottus, Briareus, and Gyges. Each has, as the name suggests, 100 powerful arms flailing about and 50 heads. Imagine trying to get them to bed on time, or the logistics of knitting sweaters for them. Utter nightmare. They are immense, chaotic, and frankly terrifying. Then come the Cyclopes, Brontes, Thunderer, Steropes, Lightner, and Argesh Bright. These aren't just any one-eyed giants. They are master craftsmen, incredibly strong, with a single blazing eye in the middle of their foreheads. Useful for detail work, I suppose, but still a bit unsettling at the family dinner table. Now Uranus looks at these unique offspring, and instead of cooing over their 50 heads or appreciating their artisanal lightning bolt potential, he's horrified. He finds them monstrous, an affront to his starry perfection. He's a neat freak sky god, and these kids are just too much cosmic mess. So, what does he do? He takes these powerful children, his own flesh and blood, and shoves them back into Gaia. Yes, you heard that right. He imprisons them deep within the earth, in the dark recesses of Tartarus, which, if you recall, is that supermax prison in the cosmic basement. He essentially tells Gaia, here you deal with them. Gaia, poor Earth Mother, is understandably distressed. She loves her children, no matter how many arms or eyes they possess. And having them forcibly confined within her own body causes her immense pain and anguish. You can almost hear her groaning under the strain, the earth trembling with her sorrow and growing anger. She's literally full of her rebellious, imprisoned offspring. Imagine the worst indigestion of your life, then multiply it by 100-handed, 50-headed, thundercrafting factor. It's not a good look or feel. This cruelty, this casual dismissal of his own children, and the pain inflicted on his partner, is Uranus's big mistake. It sows the seeds of rebellion. As time, or whatever passed for it then, goes on, Gaia and Uranus have more children. These are the Titans, 12 of them, 6 sons, Oceanus, Ceus, Crius, Hyperion, Iapetus, and the youngest, Cronus, and 6 daughters, the Titanides, Thea, Rhea, Themis, Mnemosyne, Phoebe, and Tethys. These Titans are, let's say, more conventionally divine in appearance. Still powerful, still immense, but less extra. They're the kind of gods you could, perhaps, eventually build a temple for without it immediately being flattened by 50 flailing arms. The mainstream historical fact here is that these Titans often represented fundamental aspects of the cosmos or human experience. Oceanus, the great world-encircling river, Hyperion, the sun, Mnemosyne, memory. Their very names and functions give us a glimpse into how the early Greeks perceived the building blocks of their reality. Gaia, still seething from Uranus's cruelty and the constant internal discomfort, decides she's had enough. She hatches a plan, a rather drastic plan, involving some very specific and very sharp metallurgy. She goes deep within herself and fashions a great sickle, an adamantine sickle. Adamantine is this mythical, super-hard metal. Think Valyrian steel, but for gods. The glint of it in the subterranean gloom must have been terrifyingly beautiful. Then she gathers her Titan children, the ones not currently doing hard time inside her, and lays out her grievance. She explains how their father is a cosmic jerk, how he's imprisoned their siblings, and how he's causing her unending pain. She holds up the gleaming sickle and asks, "Which of you will help me punish your father?" There's a long, awkward silence. The Titans look at each other. Taking on Dad, the actual sky, the current undisputed king of everything? That's a big ask. Most of them are understandably hesitant. They're probably thinking, pass, big pass. But then one steps forward. Cronus, the youngest, often described as wily or crooked counseling. Maybe he has an Oedipus complex before Oedipus was even a twinkle in a playwright's eye. Or maybe he's just ambitious. He says, "Mother, I'll do it." He's our father, sure, but he's acted shamefully. It's time for a change in management, or words to that effect. Historians still argue whether Cronus's motivation was purely ambition, a genuine desire to liberate his siblings, or if he was simply the most easily manipulated by Gaia's understandable desire for revenge. Oh, Gaia gives Cronus the adamantine sickle and hides him. That night, when Uranus, blissfully unaware of the simmering resentment and sharp objects below, descends to embrace Gaia, Cronus springs the ambush. With one swift, brutal stroke of the sickle, Cronus, well, he separates his father from his, shall we say, paternal attributes. He castrates Uranus. It's a shocking primal act of rebellion. The sky god, the all-powerful ruler, is overthrown in the most personal and definitive way imaginable. You can imagine the silent, starry scream that ripped through the cosmos. The consequences are immediate and profound. Drops of Uranus's blood fall upon Gaia, the earth. And from these potent drops, more beings spring forth. First, the Erinyes or Furies, terrifying goddesses of vengeance, born from an act of violence, destined to pursue and punish those who spill kindred blood. Talk about instant karma. Then come the Gigantes, the giants mighty and warlike, who will later cause a whole heap of trouble for the next generation of gods. And finally, the Mealy, the ash tree nymphs, from whom, some say, the race of Bronze Age men would later be fashioned. But what of the severed out parts? Cronus, perhaps not wanting to keep them as a souvenir, bit weird, even for a Titan, flings them into the sea. As they drift through the waves, a white foam gathers around him, and from this sea foam, near the island of Cyprus or Cythera, both claim her, arises Aphrodite, the goddess of love, beauty, pleasure, and procreation. Born from violence, yet the epitome of beauty. That's Greek mythology for you. Always a bit of a paradox. A quirky tidbit is that the name Aphrodite itself was popularly interpreted in antiquity as meaning foam-born, aphros meaning sea foam. With Uranus now incapacitated, his power broken, Cronus becomes the new king of the gods. He and his Titan siblings take control of the cosmos. You might think, great, the tyrant is gone. Gaia is relieved. The 100-handers and Cyclopes are freed. Well, 2 out of 3 isn't bad. Cronus does become king. Gaia is certainly relieved of Uranus's oppressive presence. But Cronus, rather conveniently, forgets to free his monstrous elder siblings from Tartarus. Perhaps he found them a bit too chaotic for his new, orderly reign. Or maybe, just maybe, he was already starting to worry about anyone powerful enough to challenge him. He has, after all, just set a rather dangerous precedent. Son overthrows father. And as we'll see, that particular family tradition is far from over. The reign of the Titans begins, but it's a reign built on a violent coup, and the shadow of that sickle and the memory of what it did will hang heavy over the new king. The universe has traded one ruler for another, but whether it's an upgrade remains to be seen. The seeds of the next great conflict are already sown in Cronus's own actions and his growing paranoia. So Cronus is now top dog, king of the Titans, ruler of the cosmos. He's taken his father Uranus's place, quite literally, after that rather sharp bit of celestial surgery. You think he might learn a thing or two from Uranus's downfall, namely, don't be a terrible parent and an oppressive ruler. But alas, some lessons are only learned the hard way, or in Cronus's case, not at all. He marries his sister, Rhea. Keeping it in the family was very much the divine style back then, apparently to maintain the purity of the bloodline, or perhaps just because the dating pool was exceedingly small when you're a giant elemental being. Rhea is a gentle, motherly goddess, much like Gaia in her nurturing aspects, which, given what's about to happen, is deeply ironic. The new regime starts well enough. The Titans divvy up the various domains of the universe. Oceanus and Tethys rule the waters. Hyperion and Thea are associated with the sun and heavenly light, Ceus and Phoebe with intellect and prophecy. It's a new world order. But a prophecy hangs over Cronus, a dark cloud on his otherwise sunny, or perhaps Hyperion-lit, reign. His parents, Uranus and Gaia, both wounded and wise, had foretold that just as he had overthrown his father, so too would he be overthrown by one of his own children. This prophecy gnaws at Cronus. He becomes obsessed, paranoid. He can't enjoy his power for fear of losing it. Sound familiar? It's the classic tyrant's trap. And so, as Rhea begins to bear children, Cronus devises a truly horrifying plan to circumvent fate. Each time Rhea gives birth, Cronus is there waiting. And as soon as the child is born, he takes it and swallows it whole. Yes, swallows. his own newborn children. First Hestia, goddess of the hearth. Gulp. Then Demeter, goddess of the harvest. Gulp. Hera, future queen of the gods. Gulp. Hades, future lord of the underworld. Gulp. And Poseidon, future master of the seas. Gulp. He's literally consuming his potential rivals, turning his own stomach into a divine prison. You can imagine Rhea's despair. Each child, a brief moment of joy, then snatched away by her increasingly monstrous husband. She pleads, she weeps, but Cronus, driven by his fear, is relentless. He's not making the same mistake Uranus did by just imprisoning them. He's going for complete and utter internal containment. Rhea is heartbroken and desperate. As she becomes pregnant with her sixth child, she knows she can't let this happen again. She turns to her own parents, Gaia and Uranus. Yes, the same Uranus who Cronus so spectacularly unfathered, for help. They, understanding the pain of losing children to a tyrannical spouse, devise a plan to save the newest baby. It's a classic bait and switch. Gaia tells Rhea to go to the island of Crete, specifically to a remote cave on Mount Dicte or Mount Ida. Accounts vary, a common theme when you're dealing with myths that are thousands of years old and had many local variations. There, in secret, Rhea gives birth to her youngest son, Zeus. Instead of handing over the baby Zeus to Cronus, Rhea wraps a large stone, known as the Omphalos stone, in swaddling clothes. She presents this decoy baby to Cronus. Cronus, not one for due diligence apparently, and perhaps his eyesight isn't what it used to be after swallowing 5 other divine beings, takes the swaddled stone and gulps it down without a second glance. He probably just assumed it was another delicious, prophecy-defying infant. A quirky historical tidbit is that the Omphalos stone was later displayed at Delphi, considered the navel of the world, believed by some to be that very stone. So you could, in theory, have visited the rock that saved the king of the gods. Meanwhile, the real baby Zeus is spirited away and hidden in that Cretan cave. He's raised in secret, nursed by a goat named Amalthea, or sometimes a nymph of the same name who owned a goat. Myths are wonderfully fluid. His cries are drowned out by the Curetes, warrior-like spirits or minor deities who clash their spears and shields. A divine baby alarm system. Think of it as the ancient world's most intense white noise machine. Amalthea the goat is so important that when she dies, Zeus, in gratitude, is said to have used her hide to create the Aegis, his powerful shield, and her horn became the cornucopia, the horn of plenty. Even the divine babysitters get legendary status. Zeus grows to manhood with remarkable speed, as gods tend to do. He's strong, cunning, and filled with a righteous anger towards a father he's never known, but whose tyranny has shaped his entire existence. He's aware of his destiny, perhaps guided by Gaia or Métis, a Titan goddess of wisdom who becomes his first consort, and whose own story with Zeus is a whole other can of swallowed worms for later. The time for the Olympian uprising is drawing near. The first step is to free his swallowed siblings. Métis, or sometimes Gaia, concocts an emetic potion, a divine barf inducer. Zeus, or Métis disguised, manages to trick Cronus into drinking it. Perhaps it was disguised as a celebratory wine or a new health elixir. The effect is spectacular. Cronus, with much divine retching and discomfort, vomits up his children, whole and undigested, now fully grown. First the stone, which must have been a bit of a shock, then Poseidon, Hades, Hera, Demeter, and Hestia. They emerge, not as helpless infants, but as powerful adult gods, understandably annoyed about their prolonged internal stay. Talk about a dramatic family reunion. Hey kids, sorry I ate you. No hard feelings. Probably not. The newly liberated gods, with Zeus at their head, are ready to challenge Cronus and the other titans who sided with him. Historians still argue whether the Titanomachy, the great war between the Titans and the Olympians, was a purely symbolic myth representing the triumph of order over older, more chaotic forces, or if it perhaps reflected, in a highly mythologized way, actual historical shifts in religious beliefs or power structures in ancient Greece. Whatever its deeper meaning, the battle lines are drawn. On one side, Cronus and most of the Titans, representing the old guard. On the other, Zeus and his siblings, the young ambitious Olympians, eager to claim their birthright. The war, known as the Titanomachy, is not a quick skirmish. It rages for 10 long years. The fate of the cosmos hangs in the balance. Mountains are hurled as missiles, the earth shakes, the seas boil, and the sky itself groans under the strain of divine conflict. It's an epic, universe-altering clash of raw power. Zeus, however, has a trump card. Remembering the stories of his monstrous uncles, the Hundred-Handers and the Cyclopes, still imprisoned in Tartarus by Cronus, who clearly hadn't learned his lesson about freeing useful allies, Zeus travels to the underworld and liberates them. This is a game changer. The Cyclopes, grateful for their freedom, forge magnificent weapons for the Olympians. For Zeus, the thunderbolt, his iconic weapon of unimaginable power. For Poseidon, the trident, capable of shaking the earth and stirring the seas. And for Hades, the helm of darkness, which grants invisibility. The Hundred-Handers, with their multiple arms, become living artillery, hurling volleys of massive boulders at the Titan forces. Their combined might tips the scales. The old world is about to be violently swept away, and a new divine dynasty, with all its own quirks and dysfunctions, is poised to take over. The universe is holding its breath. The Titanomachy, that decade-long cosmic brawl, finally grinds to a halt, thanks in no small part to Zeus's strategic alliances and the awesome firepower provided by his newly liberated uncles, the Cyclopes and the Hundred-Handers. You can just imagine the scene: thunderbolts splitting the sky, trident-induced earthquakes rattling the very foundations of existence, and a barrage of mountain-sized rocks courtesy of those 50-headed, 100-armed super-soldiers. The Titans, for all their ancient power, are overwhelmed. Cronus, the baby-eating king, is defeated, his reign of paranoid tyranny brought to a crashing end. So what do you do with a bunch of defeated, immortal, super-powerful beings who tried to, destroy you? You can't exactly send them to their rooms without supper. Zeus, learning from past mistakes, both his fathers and grandfathers, decides on a more permanent solution for most of them. Cronus and the male Titans who fought against the Olympians are bound in unbreakable chains, forged by the Cyclopes, of course, and cast down into Tartarus. Remember Tartarus? That gloomy pit as far beneath the earth as the sky is above it. Yeah, that's where they're going. The Hundred-Handers, in a nice bit of role reversal, become their jailers. It's a grim end for the old rulers, a stark warning to any who might challenge the new order. Some Titans, like Oceanus, who largely stayed neutral, or Prometheus and Epimetheus, who actually sided with Zeus, more on them later, are spared this fate. Themis and Mnemosyne, Titan goddesses of divine law and memory respectively, also find favor with the new regime, their wisdom being too valuable to discard. With the old guard well and truly locked away, it's time to establish the new headquarters. And what better place for a pantheon of victorious gods than the highest peak in Greece? Mount Olympus, its summit perpetually shrouded in clouds, becomes the celestial palace, the divine boardroom, the ultimate gated community. You can almost picture them, fresh from war, surveying their new domain. There up there is crisp, rarefied, a fitting atmosphere for beings who now control the fate of the cosmos. From this cloudy citadel, they will rule over gods and mortals alike. Now let's meet the core members of this new divine administration, the original 6 Olympians, the children of Cronus and Rhea, Zeus, Hera, Poseidon, Hades, Demeter, and Hestia. After their rather traumatic early years, being swallowed whole tends to leave a mark. They draw lots to divide the realms of the world. Zeus, having led the rebellion and wielding the mighty thunderbolt, naturally gets the sky and becomes king of the gods, supreme ruler of Olympus. He's the big boss, the chairman of the divine board, though his authority will be challenged more than once, often by his own unruly family. Poseidon, with his powerful trident, draws the sea. He becomes the earth shaker, god of oceans, earthquakes, and horses, an interesting addition to his portfolio, perhaps linked to the frothing waves resembling charging steeds. You can imagine him, trident in hand, surveying his watery kingdom, a moody and tempestuous deity, much like the seas he commands. His palace is naturally an underwater marvel of coral and pearl. Hades gets the short straw, or perhaps the dark straw, and draws the underworld. He becomes Lord of the Dead, ruler of the subterranean realm that bears his name. It's a gloomy, thankless job, but a necessary one. He's not an evil god, despite modern connotations. He's more of a stern, just administrator of the afterlife, ensuring the dead stay dead and the rules are followed. He rarely visits Olympus, preferring his shadowy kingdom, which probably suited everyone else just fine, given his rather somber disposition. Historians still argue whether Hades was truly considered an Olympian in the strictest sense, as he didn't reside on Mount Olympus, but his power and lineage certainly placed him among the top tier of deities. Now for the sisters. Hera, Zeus's formidable elder sister, becomes his wife and queen of the gods. Their marriage is stormy, to say the least. She's the goddess of marriage, women, childbirth, and family, which is deeply ironic given Zeus's constant infidelities and the resulting drama that consumes much of her energy. She's powerful, regal, and possesses a famously jealous temper. You do not want to be the other woman, or even the innocent offspring of one of Zeus's affairs when Hera's around. Demeter becomes the goddess of agriculture, grain, and the harvest, the fertility of the earth. She's a nurturing, maternal figure responsible for making sure things grow, which is pretty crucial for the mortals down below. Her moods directly affect the seasons, as we'll see in a later story involving her beloved daughter Persephone. When Demeter's happy, the sun shines and the crops flourish. When she's grieving, well, get ready for a long, cold winter. Hestia, the eldest sister, is the goddess of the hearth, home, and domesticity. She's a gentle, peaceful deity who, in some traditions, actually gives up her seat on the Olympian council to Dionysus to avoid conflict. She represents the calm center, the sacred fire that burns in every home and temple. A mainstream historical fact is that in ancient Greek cities, the Prytaneum or town hall housed a public hearth sacred to Hestia, from which embers were carried to establish new colonies, symbolizing the continuity of the community. These six formed the initial core, but the Olympian family soon expands. Zeus, being Zeus, has numerous affairs and fathers many other significant deities who take their place on Olympus. There's Athena, goddess of wisdom, warfare, and crafts, famously born fully formed from Zeus's head after he swallowed her pregnant mother Metis. See, I told you we'd get back to that. Swallowing powerful females seems to be a bit of a Zeus family trait, though he at least assimilated Metis's wisdom rather than just imprisoning her. Then there's Apollo, god of music, poetry, prophecy, light, and healing, and his twin sister Artemis, goddess of the hunt, wild animals, and childbirth. Their mother was the Titaness Leto, who Hera hounded relentlessly during her pregnancy. You also have Ares, the god of war, son of Zeus and Hera, embodying the brutal, chaotic aspect of battle, often contrasted with Athena's more strategic approach to warfare. Aphrodite, foam born from Uranus's severed bits, is often included among the Olympians, goddess of love, beauty, and desire. Her husband is Hephaestus, the lame god of fire, metalworking, and crafts, the son of Zeus and Hera, or sometimes Hera alone, in a fit of pique over Zeus birthing Athena. He's the divine blacksmith, an unglamorous but essential member of the team, crafting incredible weapons and artifacts. Hermes, the swift messenger god, patron of travelers, merchants, and thieves. Another son of Zeus with the nymph Maia is known for his cunning and winged sandals. And finally, Dionysus, god of wine, revelry, ecstasy, and theater, a latecomer to Olympus, son of Zeus and the mortal woman Semele, whose story is tragic and transformative. This divine family, the 12 or sometimes 14, depending on who's counting and whether Hestia or Hades are included in the core group Olympians, are a vibrant, powerful, and incredibly dysfunctional bunch. They bicker, they plot, they have affairs, they exact revenge, and occasionally they manage to govern the cosmos. Their personalities are all too human, just magnified to a divine scale. They are not abstract, distant deities. They are deeply involved in the world, especially in the lives of mortals, for better or very often for worse. Imagine the most dramatic reality TV show, but with universe-altering stakes and much better special effects. A quirky tidbit about their celestial home: ambrosia and nectar were their food and drink, granting immortality and eternal youth. No wonder they fought so hard to keep their spot at the top. Their reign is just beginning, and the world, both divine and mortal, will never be the same, with Mount Olympus now firmly established as the divine HQ, and the major gods having carved out their respective domains. You might think it's time for a bit of peace and quiet in the cosmos. Well, think again. This is Greek mythology, where peace is just the interval between epic dramas. Now that the gods are settled, their attention and their often problematic creative urges turn towards the world below, specifically towards the creation of mortal beings. You and me, or at least our ancient mythological ancestors. The story of mankind's creation is, like many Greek myths, a bit of a tangle, with different versions and key players. But one of the most prominent figures in this particular chapter is Prometheus. His name means forethought, and he's a Titan, son of Iapetus. Unlike many of his Titan brethren who got themselves banished to Tartarus for backing the wrong horse in the Titanomachy, Prometheus, along with his somewhat less intellectually gifted brother Epimetheus, whose name means afterthought, a cosmic joke in itself, had sided with Zeus. So he's in the new administration's good books, at least for now. Prometheus is often depicted as a bit of a rebel, a champion of mankind, even when it puts him at odds with the big boss Zeus. He's tasked, in some versions of the myth, with forming humans. So you picture him, the cosmic sculptor, down on Earth. He takes clay, perhaps mixing it with water, and carefully molds it into the shape of human beings. He breathes life into them, or perhaps Athena does, in a collaborative effort. Imagine him working, carefully crafting these fragile new creatures, perhaps seeing in them a potential that even the other gods might overlook. He makes them in the image of the gods, standing upright, unlike the other animals, so they can gaze towards the heavens. It's a rather noble beginning, this act of divine pottery. However, these first humans are pretty helpless. They're living in a harsh world, without much to protect them or make their lives easier. They're basically fumbling around in the dark, cold, and hungry. Zeus, it seems, wasn't overly concerned with their comfort levels. He saw them as subordinate beings, existing primarily to honor the gods with sacrifices. And this is where the trouble starts. There's a famous incident at Mycone or Sicyon, a gathering where gods and mortals are trying to decide how sacrifices should be divided. Prometheus, ever the trickster and advocate for his fragile creations, decides to pull a fast one on Zeus. He slaughters an ox and divides it into two portions. One portion is the good stuff, the juicy meat and edible organs, but he hides it beneath the ox's unappetizing stomach. The other portion is just bones, cleverly disguised with a glistening layer of rich fat on top. He then invites Zeus to choose which portion the gods will receive from mortal sacrifices. Zeus, though likely seeing through the deception, he's not king of the gods for nothing, and some say he allowed himself to be tricked to have an excuse to punish mankind, picks the fat-covered bones. This act sets the precedent. Mortals would henceforth burn the bones and fat as offerings to the gods, keeping the edible meat for themselves. You can almost hear Prometheus snickering to himself. Gotcha. Zeus, however, is not amused. He's furious at being tricked, and his anger is directed not just at Prometheus, but at mankind as well. As punishment for this deception, and to make life harder for these mortals who got the better end of the sacrificial bargain, Zeus withholds fire from humanity. No more cozy hearths, no more cooked food, no more light in the darkness. He essentially yanks their primordial Zippo. Life for early humans gets a whole lot tougher. They're shivering in caves, eating raw food, and probably stubbing their toes a lot. But Prometheus, champion of the underdog, isn't done. He can't stand to see his creations suffer. So, in an act of audacious defiance, he steals fire from the gods. There are a couple of versions of how he does this. In one, he ascends to Olympus and lights a torch from the fiery chariot of Helios, the sun god. In another, more common version, he steals an ember from the forge of Hephaestus, the divine blacksmith, concealing it in the hollow stalk of a fennel plant. Fennel stalks, as a quirky tidbit, dry out but retain a soft, pithy core that can smolder for a long time, making them perfect ancient fire transportation devices. Imagine him, carefully climbing down from the heavens, that precious spark hidden away, knowing he's risking everything. He brings fire to mankind, and with it, warmth, light, the ability to cook food, to forge tools, and ultimately, the spark of civilization itself. Fire is a game changer. It allows for craft, for defense, for community around a shared hearth. Zeus, when he sees the fires burning on earth, is incandescent with rage. This is twice Prometheus has defied him. His punishment for Prometheus is famously brutal. He has him chained to a rock in the Caucasus Mountains, where an eagle, or sometimes a vulture, an agent of Zeus, comes every day to peck out his liver. And because Prometheus is immortal, his liver regenerates every night, only to be devoured again the next day. An eternity of agonizing, daily disembowelment. It's a gruesome fate, meant as a stark warning to any other would-be benefactors of humanity or divine dissidents. This prolonged torture of Prometheus is a powerful symbol of the conflict between divine authority and the compassionate spirit, and the price of rebellion. But Zeus's revenge doesn't stop with Prometheus. He decides to punish mankind as well, for accepting the stolen gift of fire. And this is where Pandora comes in. Oh, Pandora. Her name means all gifted, and she is to be Zeus's beautiful evil, a lovely poisoned chalice for humanity. He orders Hephaestus to sculpt a woman from earth and water, just as Prometheus had sculpted men. Athena then clothes her in beautiful garments and teaches her needlework and weaving. Aphrodite bestows upon her irresistible beauty and grace. Hermes gives her a shameless mind and a deceitful nature and the power of persuasive speech. Basically, she's custom designed to be trouble, wrapped in an alluring package. Remember that crocodile dung sunscreen we might have joked about in another context? Pandora is far more subtly dangerous. Zeus presents Pandora as a gift to Epimetheus, Prometheus's afterthought brother. Prometheus, before his unfortunate eagle-related demise, had warned Epimetheus never to accept any gifts from Zeus. But Epimetheus, true to his name, isn't much for forethought. He sees the beautiful Pandora and, well, he's smitten. He accepts her, and with her a jar, often mistranslated as a box. The original Greek word is pithos, a large storage jar. This jar, Pandora's jar, was either a wedding gift from Zeus or something she brought with her. The gods had filled it with all the evils and miseries of the world, disease, suffering, toil, old age, vice, and so on. Curiosity, perhaps a gift from Hermes too, gets the better of Pandora. Despite being warned not to, or perhaps because she was warned not to, she opens the jar. And out fly all the terrible things that have plagued humanity ever since. All the sorrows, sicknesses, and hardships swarm out into the world, spreading like a pestilence. Pandora, horrified, claps the lid back on, but it's too late. Everything has escaped, except for one thing, cowering at the very bottom of the jar. Elpis, the spirit of hope. Historians still argue whether the inclusion of hope at the bottom of the jar was a final cruelty from Zeus, a deceptive illusion to keep mankind struggling, or a small mercy, a genuine comfort to help endure the newly unleashed evils. Whichever it is, mankind now has fire and civilization, but also a world full of suffering, with only hope to cling to. It's a mixed bag, to say the least. The age of innocent, if somewhat clueless, humanity is over. The world just got a whole lot more complicated and a lot more like the one we know today, so humanity now has fire, tools, and nascent civilization thanks to Prometheus, and a whole host of troubles courtesy of Pandora's rather ill-advised peek into her wedding present. You're probably starting to see a pattern here. The gods giveth, and the gods taketh away, often with a hefty dose of drama and collateral damage. This is where we delve into the nitty-gritty of how the Olympians, in their cloudy, luxurious abode on Mount Olympus, directly and often capriciously meddled in the affairs of mortals. Their whims, their tempers, their love affairs, their rivalries, these weren't just celestial soap operas. They had very real, often devastating consequences for the little guys down below. Zeus, as king of the gods, is naturally a prime offender or benefactor, depending on his mood and who caught his wandering eye. His amorous adventures are legendary and a constant source of rage for his queen, Hera. He'd transform himself into a shower of gold to impregnate Danae, resulting in the hero Perseus, a swan to seduce Leda, mother of Helen of Troy and Clytemnestra, among others, a bull to carry off Europa, who gave her name to a continent, and even an eagle to snatch the handsome Trojan prince Ganymede to be his cupbearer on Olympus. Each of these affairs didn't just result in a new demigod or a new constellation, they often brought chaos. Hera, in her jealousy, would relentlessly persecute Zeus's lovers and their offspring. Remember Leto, mother of Apollo and Artemis, who was hounded by Hera and forbidden to give birth on any land under the sun. She finally found refuge on the floating island of Delos. This divine vindictiveness had tangible effects. Curses, monsters sent to plague regions, divine disfavor that could ruin a city or a family for generations. Poseidon, lord of the seas, was similarly tempestuous. If a king failed to sacrifice the right bull to him, or if a city slighted him, you could expect earthquakes, floods, or sea monsters to appear with alarming regularity. Think of Laomedon, king of Troy, who commissioned Apollo and Poseidon to build the walls of his city when they were serving a term of forced labor, long story, involving a failed rebellion against Zeus. Laomedon then refused to pay them their agreed-upon wages. Bad move. Apollo sent a plague, and Poseidon unleashed a sea monster to ravage the Trojan coast. The only way to appease it? Sacrifice Laomedon's daughter, Hesione. This is high-stakes diplomacy, where forgetting to tip your divine contractors can lead to your daughter becoming monster chow. Ares, the god of war, naturally reveled in conflict. He didn't necessarily start all wars, but he certainly fanned the flames, thriving on the bloodlust and chaos of battle. If Ares favored one side in a conflict, they might fight with a berserker rage, but if he was against you, or if Athena, goddess of strategic warfare, was backing your opponent, things could go badly very quickly. His presence wasn't about justice or noble causes. It was about the sheer, brutal joy of combat. Mortals were often just pawns in these divine war games. Aphrodite, goddess of love and beauty, wielded a different kind of power, but one no less disruptive. She could inspire overwhelming passion, often with disastrous results. The Trojan War, one of the most epic conflicts in Greek mythology, was essentially sparked by a beauty contest and Aphrodite's promise of the most beautiful woman in the world, Helen, to Paris, the Trojan prince who judged her the fairest. This divine meddling, this promise, led to a decade of bloodshed, the destruction of a great city, and the deaths of countless heroes, all because of a golden apple and a goddess's vanity. You can imagine the average mortal soldier dying on the plains of Troy, thinking, really? All this for that? Even seemingly benevolent deities could have a dark side or make demands that shaped mortal lives in profound ways. Artemis, goddess of the hunt and chastity, was fiercely protective of her purity and her sacred animals. When Agamemnon, leader of the Greek forces sailing to Troy, accidentally killed one of her sacred deer and boasted about it, Artemis was enraged. She becalmed the seas, stranding the entire Greek fleet at Aulis. The price for a fair win to Troy? Agamemnon had to sacrifice his own daughter, Iphigenia. The gods demand, mortals comply, often at an unbearable personal cost. This particular story has many variations, some more hopeful for Iphigenia than others, but the initial divine decree is chilling. A mainstream historical fact is that animal sacrifice was a cornerstone of ancient Greek religious practice, a way to communicate with, appease, and honor the gods. The type of animal, the method of sacrifice, and the division of the meat were all highly ritualized. Apollo, god of prophecy, music, and light, delivered his divine will through oracles, most famously the oracle at Delphi. The cryptic pronouncements of his priestess, the Pythia, could determine the fate of individuals and entire city-states. Kings and commoners alike would make the perilous journey to Delphi to seek guidance. But Apollo could also be terrifyingly wrathful. When Niobe, a mortal queen, boasted that she was more blessed with children than Leto, Apollo and Artemis's mother, Apollo and Artemis responded by slaying all of Niobe's numerous sons and daughters with their arrows. Niobe, weeping, was turned into a stone from which her tears continued to flow. The message, hubris, excessive pride, especially when directed against the gods, will be met with swift and devastating retribution. Even Hermes, the usually charming and roguish messenger god, had his moments. He was the patron of thieves, after all. A quirky tidbit is his very first act. On the day he was born, he snuck out of his cradle, stole Apollo's sacred cattle, cleverly disguised their tracks by making them walk backward and fitting them with bark shoes, then invented the lyre from a tortoise shell and offered it to Apollo as an apology. Apollo was so charmed by the lyre and Hermes' audacity that they reconciled. This kind of divine boys will be boys attitude often meant mortals caught in the crossfire suffered the consequences of divine pranks or disputes. The gods weren't just distant arbiters. They walked among mortals, sometimes in disguise, testing their piety, their hospitality. Xenia, the sacred guest-host relationship, was hugely important, and Zeus himself was a protector, or just to satisfy their curiosity. They fell in love with mortals, had children with them, creating a whole class of demigod heroes, and took sides in human conflicts with passionate, often biased fervor. If you were a favored mortal, you might receive divine aid, magical weapons, or wise counsel. If you angered a god, intentionally or not, you could face plagues, curses, monstrous offspring, or a particularly unpleasant transformation, like Arachne, the proud weaver who boasted her skill was greater than Athena's and was turned into a spider for her trouble. Historians still argue whether these tales of divine intervention were meant as literal truth, as allegories for natural phenomena or human psychology, or as cautionary tales to enforce social and religious norms. Likely, they were a bit of all three. Your life, as an ancient Greek, was lived under the constant gaze of these powerful, emotional, and often unpredictable beings. Every storm, every bountiful harvest, every sudden illness, every stroke of luck could be interpreted as an act of the gods. You offered sacrifices, prayed for favor, and tried your best not to become the subject of a divine whim. Because when the gods decided to play, it was rarely the mortals who came out on top without paying some kind of price. The world was their chessboard, and you were one of the pieces, hoping you weren't about to be sacrificed in some grand divine game. So, The Olympians are firmly in charge, meddling in mortal affairs with abandon, and humanity is navigating a world filled with both divine gifts and divine tantrums. It's a dangerous, exciting, and frankly terrifying time to be alive. But amidst this chaos, a new kind of figure begins to emerge: the hero. These aren't just ordinary mortals, they're often demigods, the offspring of a god and a mortal, blessed or cursed, with extraordinary abilities, divine favor, and usually a destiny riddled with perilous quests and monstrous encounters. They are, in essence, the ancient world's first superheroes, and Perseus is one of the earliest and most iconic. His story begins, as many heroic tales do, with a prophecy and a rather extreme family situation. Achilles, king of Argos, is told by an oracle that his own grandson will kill him. To prevent this, he does what any sensible prophecy-fearing king would do. He locks his only daughter, Danae, in a bronze tower or sometimes an underground chamber to keep her away from any potential suitors. Solid plan, right? Well, not when the king of the gods himself has taken an interest. Zeus, ever resourceful in his romantic pursuits, and probably seeing the bronze tower as a minor inconvenience, visits Danae as a shower of golden rain, pouring through the roof, and, well, 9 months later, baby Perseus is born. You can imagine Achilles' reaction. How did that happen? Achilles, still terrified of the prophecy, but unwilling to directly kill his own daughter and grandson, spilling kindred blood is a big no-no, remember the ironies, decides on a more indirect approach. He puts Danae and baby Perseus in a large wooden chest and sets them adrift on the sea. Classic mythological problem solving. Out of sight, out of mind, let the ocean deal with it. The chest, however, doesn't sink. Guided by divine will, Zeus is probably keeping an eye on his investment, and Poseidon might have given them a gentle current. It washes ashore on the island of Seriphos. There, they are found by a kind fisherman named Dictys, whose name means Mr. Net, appropriately enough. Dictys takes them in and raises Perseus as his own. All is relatively peaceful for a while. But Dictys has a brother, Polydectes, who happens to be the king of Seriphos. And Polydectes is a nasty piece of work. He desires Danae, but Perseus, now a strong young man, is protective of his mother and stands in the king's way. So Polydectes hatches a cruel plan to get rid of Perseus. He pretends he's going to marry Hippodamia, a princess from a neighboring land, and demands that all his subjects bring him horses as wedding gifts. This was a standard way for a king to collect tribute or show of loyalty. A mainstream historical fact is that horses were a significant status symbol and military asset in ancient Greece, and a gift of horses would have been a valuable contribution. Perseus, being a poor fisherman's adopted son, has no horses to give. In a moment of youthful bravado, or perhaps goaded by Polydectes, he boasts that he can bring Polydectes anything else he desires, even the head of the Gorgon Medusa. This is exactly what Polydectes wanted to hear. Medusa is one of 3 Gorgon sisters, hideous monsters with snakes for hair, bronze hands, and a gaze so terrifying it could turn any living creature to stone. No one had ever faced Medusa and lived to tell the tale. Polydectes, thinking he's sending Perseus to certain death, eagerly accepts the offer. Excellent, he probably sneers. Bring me Medusa's head, and we'll call it even. Perseus, realizing he's made a rather rash promise, is in a bind. But this is where his divine parentage and the favor of other gods kicks in. Athena, goddess of wisdom and warfare and no fan of Medusa for reasons we might touch on later. It involves a desecrated temple, and Hermes, the helpful messenger god, decide to aid our young hero. They appear to him and give him advice in some crucial divine bling. First, they tell him he needs to find the Graeae, also known as the Grey Sisters. These are 3 ancient women, sisters of the Gorgons, who share a single eye and a single tooth between them, passing them around. They're the only ones who know the way to the nymphs of the north, or sometimes the Stygian nymphs, who possess certain magical items essential for Perseus's quest. So Perseus finds the Gree, probably looking like they haven't updated their look since the primordial soup era. He waits until they're passing the eye from one to another, snatches it, and refuses to give it back until they tell him what he needs to know. It's a bit of a mean trick, but desperate times call for desperate and slightly visually impaired measures. A quirky tidbit: the image of these three hags sharing one eye and one tooth is so memorably grotesque it has echoed through folklore for centuries. The Gree, understandably wanting their eye back, reveal the location of the nymphs. From these nymphs, Perseus receives three invaluable gifts: a pair of winged sandals so he can fly like Hermes, a magical bag called a cabesus to safely contain Medusa's head as even severed, its petrifying power remains, and most importantly, Hades' helm of darkness, the cap of invisibility. Hermes also lends him an adamantine sickle or sword, super sharp and strong. Remember the one Cronus used on Uranus? Good quality stuff. Athena gives him a highly polished bronze shield, instructing him to use it as a mirror to look at Medusa's reflection, rather than directly at her, to avoid being turned to stone. Armed with these divine uber accessories, Perseus flies to the lair of the Gorgons, at the edge of the world. He finds them asleep. Using Athena's shield as a mirror, he identifies Medusa. She was the only mortal. One of the three sisters, Stheno and Euryale, were immortal. Creeping closer, invisible thanks to Hades' cap, he swoops in and, with one swift strike of Hermes' blade, decapitates her. From Medusa's severed neck, two beings spring forth: Pegasus, the winged horse, sire by Poseidon, who had a dalliance with Medusa in, of all places, one of Athena's temples, which is why Athena was so peeved with her, and Chrysaor, a giant or winged boar, wielding a golden sword. Perseus, not pausing for introductions, shoves Medusa's head into the cabesus and, with the two remaining Gorgon sisters now awake and screeching after him, makes a swift getaway on his winged sandals. His adventures aren't over yet. On his way back to Seriphos, flying over the coast of Ethiopia, or sometimes Joppa/Philistia, he spots a beautiful maiden chained to a rock by the sea, about to be devoured by a sea monster named Cetus. This is Andromeda, daughter of King Cepheus and Queen Cassiopeia. Cassiopeia had boasted that she or her daughter was more beautiful than the Nereids, the sea nymphs. Poseidon, whose wife Amphitrite was a Nereid, sent a flood and the sea monster to punish this hubris. The oracle said the only way to appease the monster was to sacrifice Andromeda. Sound familiar? It's a recurring theme: boastful queen, angry god, sacrificial princess. Perseus, being a hero, and probably quite taken with Andromeda's predicament and beauty, swoops in. He battles Cetus, either by using Medusa's head to turn it to stone, or by fighting it with his sword, accounts vary. He frees Andromeda, and her grateful parents agree to their marriage. There's a slight complication in the form of Phineus, Andromeda's uncle, to whom she had previously been betrothed. Phineus and his followers try to ambush Perseus at the wedding feast. Big mistake. Perseus just whips out Medusa's head again. Anyone else object? Instant stone statues. Problem solved. Historians still argue whether the Andromeda myth has Near Eastern origins, possibly related to Mesopotamian creation epics involving battles with sea monsters. Finally, Perseus returns to Seriphos with Andromeda. He finds his mother Danae and his adoptive father Dictys have taken refuge at an altar, hiding from the still lustful and now furious King Polydectes. Perseus marches into the palace, where Polydectes and his courtiers are feasting. Polydectes mocks him, doubting he actually got the head. Perseus, cool as a cucumber, says, "Well, since you insist," averts his own eyes and unveils the head of Medusa. Polydectes and all his cronies are instantly turned to stone, a permanent monument to their douchebaggery. Perseus then makes the kind Dictys king of Seriphos. He returns the magical items, the winged sandals, the cabesus, and the helm of darkness to Hermes, who gives them back to the nymphs. Medusa's head he gives to Athena, who places it on her shield, the Aegis, where its petrifying power continues to serve her. And what about that original prophecy that he would kill his grandfather Achilles? Years later, Perseus is competing in some athletic games in Larissa. He throws a discus, but a stray wind, or perhaps the fates finally catching up, carries it off course, and it strikes an old man in the crowd, killing him instantly. That old man, none other than Achilles, who had come to watch the games, perhaps thinking enough time had passed. The prophecy is fulfilled, albeit accidentally. It's a classic example of how, in Greek myth, fate is often inescapable, no matter how hard you try to avoid it. Perseus, a true hero, founded the city of Mycenae and established a dynasty, his adventures setting a template for many heroes to come: divine aid, monstrous foes, a perilous quest, and a destiny intertwined with the gods. After Perseus set the heroic benchmark with his snake-haired souvenir collection and accidental grandparent discus slaughter, the world was clearly ready for more larger-than-life figures. And boy, did Greek mythology deliver, with none perhaps larger or more life-filled than Heracles, or as the Romans knew him, Hercules. If Perseus was the prototype, Heracles was the deluxe, muscle-bound, occasionally rage-fueled upgrade. His story is a sprawling epic of incredible strength, monumental labors, tragic flaws, and eventual godhood. He is, without a doubt, the most famous and arguably the greatest of the Greek heroes. Heracles' origin story, like Perseus's, involves Zeus's wandering eye and a clever deception. Zeus desired Alcmene, the virtuous wife of Amphitryon, a Theban general. So while Amphitryon was away at war, Zeus disguised himself as Amphitryon, returning triumphantly a day early. He then proceeded to spend an extra-long night with Alcmene. Some say he made the night last 3 times its normal length to really, well, enjoy his impersonation. The real Amphitryon returned the next day, understandably confused when Alcmene wasn't as surprised to see him as he expected. The result of this divine trickery and the subsequent legitimate reunion was that Alcmene became pregnant with twins, Heracles, son of Zeus, and Iphicles, son of Amphitryon. A buy-one-get-one-free situation, mythologically speaking. Hera, Zeus's ever-watchful and perpetually enraged wife, was, of course, furious. Another affair, another demigod's son who might outshine her own legitimate children. Her jealousy towards Heracles started before he was even born and would plague him for most of his life. As Alcmene was about to give birth, Zeus boasted on Olympus that a son of his lineage, due to be born that day, would rule over all those around him, specifically the land of Mycenae. Hera, hearing this, rushed to Argos and, using her divine influence, delayed Heracles' birth and sped up the birth of Eurystheus, another descendant of Perseus, and thus of Zeus, but through a less direct and therefore less threatening to Hera line. Eurystheus, born prematurely but still on that day, thus became the one destined to rule, and Heracles, when he was finally born, will be fated to serve him. A classic bit of divine loophole exploitation by Hera. Her first attempt to directly harm baby Heracles was to send 2 enormous snakes into his cradle. While his mortal twin brother Iphicles screamed in terror, baby Heracles, already displaying his superhuman strength, just gurgled happily and strangled the snakes, one in each chubby fist. Alcmene and Amphitryon found him playing with their limp bodies as if they were rattles. You can imagine the scene. "Honey, I think our son might be a bit special." Heracles grew up to be incredibly strong, brave, and skilled in all manly arts, but also prone to fits of terrible rage, a trait perhaps inherited from his divine father or constantly stoked by Hera's machinations. In one such fit, driven mad by Hera, he killed his own wife, Megra, and their children. When he regained his sanity and was overwhelmed with grief and guilt, he sought purification and guidance from the oracle at Delphi. The Pythia instructed him to go to Tiryns and serve his cousin, King Eurystheus, the one Hera had fast-tracked to the throne, for 12 years, performing whatever labors Eurystheus demanded. If he completed these tasks, he would not only be purified but would also achieve immortality. And so begin the famous 12 labors of Heracles. These weren't just odd jobs. They were a series of seemingly impossible, often monster-slaying, frequently demeaning tasks designed by Eurystheus, probably with some spiteful suggestions from Hera whispered in his ear, to destroy Heracles. The Nemean lion. First, Heracles had to kill a monstrous lion whose hide was impenetrable to weapons. He tracked it to its lair in Nemea, wrestled with it, and finally strangled it with his bare hands. He then skinned it using its own claws, since no knife could pierce the hide, and wore its pelt as armor, the lion's gaping jaws forming a fearsome hood. This became his signature look. The Lernaean Hydra. Next, he faced a 9-headed water serpent in the swamps of Lerna. The problem? When one head was cut off, 2 more grew in its place, and one head was immortal. Heracles, with the help of his nephew Iolaus, managed this by having Iolaus cauterize each stump with a burning torch as soon as Heracles lopped off a head. Heracles then buried the immortal head under a heavy rock. He dipped his arrows in the Hydra's poisonous blood, making them instantly fatal, a useful, if ethically dubious, upgrade to his arsenal. The Ceryneian hind. This was a deer with golden antlers and bronze hooves, sacred to Artemis. The task was to capture it alive, without harming it. This required speed and stamina, not just brute force. Heracles pursued it for an entire year before finally capturing it, carefully explaining to an annoyed Artemis that he was under orders. The Erymanthian boar, another capture-alive mission, this time a fearsome wild boar terrorizing Mount Erymanthus. Heracles chased it into deep snow, trapped it with nets, and carried it back to Eurystheus, who was so terrified he hid in a large bronze storage jar. Pythos, remember Pandora's? A recurring image, these kings hiding in jars. The Augean stables. This was designed to be humiliating. King Augeas of Elis had vast herds of cattle, and their stables hadn't been cleaned in 30 years. 30 years. Imagine the smell. Heracles was ordered to clean them in a single day. Instead of shoveling, which would have taken forever even for him, he ingeniously diverted 2 rivers, the Alpheus and the Panius, to flow through the stables, washing and clean. Work smarter, not harder. The Stymphalian birds, these man-eating birds with bronze beaks, claws, and metallic feathers that they could shoot like arrows, had infested a dense forest near Lake Stymphalus. Athena helped by giving Heracles a pair of bronze crotala, castanets, or rattles, forged by Hephaestus. The noise startled the birds into flight, and Heracles shot many of them down with his hydra-poisoned arrows. These first 6 labors were set in the Peloponnese. The next 6 would take him much further afield. A quirky tidbit, the number of labors was originally 10, but Eurystheus discounted 2 of them on technicalities, the Hydra, because Iolaus helped, and the Augean stables, because Heracles had arranged to be paid for it, though Augeas later reneged, so 2 more were added. Bureaucracy, even in myth. The Cretan bull. Heracles had to capture a magnificent bull that was either the one that carried Europa or the father of the Minotaur. Mythological genealogies can be complicated. It was rampaging across Crete. Heracles wrestled it into submission and shipped it back to Eurystheus, who, again terrified, wanted to dedicate it to Hera. She refused, still holding that grudge against Heracles, so it was set loose, eventually wandering to Marathon, where Theseus would later deal with it. The Mares of Diomedes. King Diomedes of Thrace owned 4 flesh-eating horses, which he fed on unsuspecting guests. Heracles, after a fierce battle, captured the horses. In some versions, he fed Diomedes to his own Mares, which calmed them down enough to be controlled. Poetic justice and a rather gruesome training technique. The Belt of Hippolyta. This involved a journey to the land of the Amazons, a tribe of warrior women, to retrieve the golden belt of their queen Hippolyta for Eurystheus' daughter. Hippolyta was actually willing to give Heracles the belt, impressed by his heroism. But Hera, disguised as an Amazon, spread a rumor that Heracles was there to abduct the queen. The Amazons attacked, and in the ensuing battle, Heracles, thinking Hippolyta had betrayed him, killed her and took the belt. A tragic misunderstanding fueled by divine interference. A mainstream historical fact. Archaeological finds in Eurasia have uncovered graves of warrior women, suggesting that the Greek myths of Amazons may have been inspired by encounters with Scythian or Sarmatian cultures where women sometimes fought alongside men. The cattle of Geryon. Heracles had to travel to the mythical western island of Erythea, the Red Land, to steal the cattle of Geryon, a three-bodied, six-armed giant. He had to kill Geryon, his two-headed watchdog Orthrus, brother of Cerberus, and the herdsman Eurytion. During this journey, he famously sailed across the ocean in the golden cup boat of Helios, the sun god, and also erected the Pillars of Hercules, the Rock of Gibraltar, and a corresponding peak in North Africa, at the Strait of Gibraltar, marking the edge of the known world. The apples of the Hesperides. These were golden apples that grew in a garden at the western edge of the world, tended by the Hesperides, nymphs of the evening, and guarded by a 100-headed dragon named Ladon. The apples were a wedding gift from Gaia to Hera. To find the garden, Heracles had many adventures, including wrestling the sea god Nereus for information and, most famously, briefly taking over Atlas's burden of holding up the sky while Atlas fetched the apples for him. Atlas tried to trick Heracles into keeping the sky-holding job, but Heracles, using his wits this time, asked Atlas to take it back for a moment so he could adjust his cloak, then grab the apples and scarpered. The capture of Cerberus. For his final, most daunting labor, Heracles had to descend into the underworld and bring back Cerberus, Hades' three-headed guard dog. Hades agreed on the condition that Heracles could subdue the beast without using any weapons. Heracles wrestled Cerberus into submission with his bare hands, dragged him, probably kicking and barking with all three heads, up to Eurystheus, who predictably hid in his jar again, and then dutifully returned the monstrous hound to Hades. Historians still argue whether the 12 labors represent a solar myth. Heracles is a sun hero passing through the 12 zodiac signs, a shamanic journey, or a collection of pre-existing local hero myths consolidated into one epic cycle. Whatever their origin, these labors solidified Heracles' reputation as the ultimate hero, a figure of immense strength, endurance, and despite his flaws, a capacity for great suffering and eventual triumph. His to-do list was truly Herculean, and he ticked off every impossible item. While Heracles was off wrestling multi-headed dogs and convincing giants to briefly hold up the sky, other heroes were carving out their own legends. Not all of them were quite as brawny as Heracles, but they often made up for it with courage, cunning, and a healthy dose of divine assistance. One such hero was Theseus, the great champion of Athens, whose most famous exploit involved a labyrinth, a monstrous half-man, half-bull, and a very helpful princess with a ball of string. Theseus's origins, like many heroes, are a bit muddled and conveniently royal. His mother was Aethra, daughter of King Pythius of Troezen. His father was officially Aegeus, king of Athens. However, on the very same night that Aegeus lay with Aethra, Poseidon also, shall we say, paid her a visit. So Theseus had a potential divine papa, which certainly didn't hurt his heroic credentials. Before Aegeus left Troezen, he placed his sword and sandals under a massive rock and told Aethra that if she bore a son who, upon reaching manhood, could lift the rock and retrieve these tokens, she should send him to Athens to claim his birthright. Classic proof of paternity via heavy lifting test. Theseus grew up strong and brave. When he was old enough, Aethra showed him the rock. He lifted it with ease, a sign of his burgeoning heroic strength, perhaps a gift from his possible sea god father, and retrieved the sword and sandals. Now he had a choice, a safe sea voyage to Athens, or the much more dangerous overland route, which was infested with bandits and monsters. Guess which one our budding hero chose? If you guessed dangerous, you're learning how these stories work. His journey to Athens was like a mini-series of Heracles-style labors, establishing his heroic reputation along the way. He dispatched Periphetes, the club-bearer, with his own bronze club. He dealt with Cenes, the pine-bender, who would tie victims to two bent pine trees and then release them, tearing them apart. Theseus gave him a taste of his own medicine. He killed the Crommyonian sow, a monstrous wild pig. He outwitted Chiron, who made travelers wash his feet and then kicked them off a cliff to be eaten by a giant sea turtle. Theseus made him take the plunge instead. He wrestled and defeated Circean, the Arcadian wrestling champion. And finally, he dealt with Procrustes, the stretcher, an innkeeper who had two beds, one too short, one too long. He'd offer the short bed to tall guests and lop off their excess length, and the long bed to short guests, stretching them to fit. Theseus, in a neat bit of poetic justice, fitted Procrustes to his own bed. By the time he reached Athens, he was already a celebrated hero. When he arrived in Athens, King Aegeus didn't immediately recognize him. It had been a while after all. However, Medea the sorceress, yes, that Medea, formerly of Jason and the Argonauts fame, now shacked up with Aegeus, these myths have more crossovers than a superhero movie franchise, recognized him and seeing him as a threat to her own son's potential claim to the throne, tried to poison him. Just as Theseus was about to drink the poison wine, Aegeus spotted the sword he was carrying, his own sword, from under the rock. He dashed the cup from Theseus's hand and embraced him as his son and heir. Medea, her plan foiled, made a hasty exit, probably in a chariot pulled by dragons, as was her style. Now, Athens at this time was under a dark shadow. Years earlier, Androgeos, a son of King Minos of Crete, had been killed in Athens, or by Athenians. Minos, a powerful and vengeful ruler, son of Zeus and Europa, remember the bowl incident, waged war on Athens and defeated them. As punishment, or as tribute, Athens was forced to send a periodic offering every 9 years, or some say every year, of 7 young men and 7 young women to Crete. There, these unfortunate youths were sacrificed to the Minotaur. The Minotaur, whose name was Asterion, Starry One, ironically, was a monstrous creature with the body of a man and the head of a bull. His origins are another tale of divine wrath and questionable choices. Minos had prayed to Poseidon to send him a bull from the sea to sacrifice, to prove his divine right to rule Crete. Poseidon sent a magnificent white bull. But Minos, so impressed by its beauty, decided to keep it for himself and sacrifice another bull from his own herds instead. Bad move. You don't shortchange the sea god. Poseidon, furious at the insult, didn't just send an earthquake. He got creative. He made Minos's wife, Queen Pasiphae, fall madly, unnaturally in love with the white bull. Pasiphae, consumed by this divinely induced passion, sought the help of the master craftsman Daedalus, who was chilling in Crete at the time, having fled Athens after, well, a bit of professional jealousy involving his nephew Perdiccas and a saw. Daedalus, ever the ingenious inventor, constructed a hollow wooden cow, covered it with cowhide, and wheeled Pasiphae, hidden inside, into the pasture where the bull grazed. The bull was fooled. The result of this bizarre union was the Minotaur. Minos, horrified and ashamed by this monstrous stepson, couldn't bring himself to kill it. So he had Daedalus design and build an intricate, inescapable maze called the labyrinth to house the creature. And it was into this labyrinth that the Athenian youths were sent, to wander hopelessly until they were inevitably found and devoured by the Minotaur. This is the grim situation Theseus finds when he's acknowledged as Aegeus's son. The time for the third tribute to Crete was approaching. Theseus, brave and determined to end this horrific sacrifice, volunteered to be one of the 7 young men. Imagine the scene, the city in mourning, the young people chosen, facing almost certain death. Aegeus was heartbroken, but couldn't dissuade his heroic son. He made Theseus promise that if he succeeded in killing the Minotaur and returned alive, he would change the black sail of his ship, used for the sacrificial journey, to a white one, so Aegeus would know from afar that he was safe. Upon arrival in Crete, Theseus's noble bearing and courage caught the eye of Ariadne, King Minos's daughter and half-sister to the Minotaur, which must have made for awkward family dinners. Ariadne fell in love with Theseus and, wanting to save him, decided to betray her father and her city. She sought advice from Daedalus, the labyrinth's architect, who, perhaps feeling a bit guilty about his role in the whole affair, gave her the solution: a ball of thread, or sometimes a jeweled crown that lit the way. Ariadne gave this to Theseus, telling him to tie one end of the thread to the entrance of the labyrinth and unroll it as he went, so he could find his way back out. A quirky tidbit: the phrase Ariadne's thread has become a common idiom for a clue or means of solving a complex problem. So Theseus, armed with his sword and Ariadne's thread, entered the dark, twisting passages of the labyrinth. The other Athenian youths waited nervously at the entrance. He ventured deep into the maze, the silence broken only by his own footsteps and perhaps the distant, terrifying roars of the Minotaur. Finally, he confronted the beast in the labyrinth's central chamber. A fierce battle ensued. Theseus, using his strength and skill, managed to kill the Minotaur, some say with his bare hands, others with his sword. A mainstream historical fact is that the palace complex at Knossos in Crete, with its intricate layout and many rooms, discovered by archaeologist Sir Arthur Evans, is believed by some to be the historical basis for the labyrinth myth. Its Minoan civilization flourished in the Bronze Age, long before classical Athens. Having defeated the monster, Theseus followed the thread back out of the labyrinth, leading the other Athenian youths to freedom. He then quickly set sail for Athens, taking Ariadne with him as promised. However, and this part of the story is a bit debated by scholars and has different versions, he abandoned Ariadne on the island of Naxos or Dia while she was asleep. Why? Some say Athena or Dionysus ordered him to, as Ariadne was destined for the god Dionysus. Others say Theseus was simply a bit of a cad. Whatever the reason, Ariadne woke up to find herself alone, only to be found and consoled, and eventually married by Dionysus, who was conveniently passing by. She got a god for a husband, so perhaps it wasn't all bad for her. Theseus, sailing on towards Athens, either in his grief over abandoning Ariadne or in the excitement of his victory, forgot his promise to his father. He forgot to change the black sail to white. King Aegeus, waiting anxiously on the cliffs of Attica, scanning the horizon, saw the ship approaching with its black sail still hoisted. Believing his son was dead, he was overcome with grief and threw himself into the sea, which was thereafter named the Aegean Sea in his memory. A tragic end, born from a simple, devastating oversight. Theseus returned to Athens a hero, but also a grieving son. He became the king, a wise and just ruler, credited with unifying Attica, founding the Panathenaic Games, and establishing Athens as a democracy. Though the historical timeline for Athenian democracy is much later, myths often credit heroes with foundational acts. His Cretan adventure, the slaying of the Minotaur, remained his most famous deed, a testament to courage, ingenuity, and the vital importance of a good ball of string when navigating life's more monstrous challenges. With Heracles having completed his epic franchise of labors and Theseus having navigated the original escape room, you might think the age of grand, perilous expeditions was winding down. But no, the ancient world still had plenty of magical MacGuffins to quest for, and plenty of ambitious young heroes eager to risk life, limb, and crew for a shot at glory. Enter Jason and the Argonauts, a story that's less about solo heroics and more about a team effort. A kind of ancient mythological Ocean's 11, but with more monsters and fewer casinos. Their target, the legendary Golden Fleece. The story begins, as so many of these do, with a dodgy family situation and a usurped throne. In Iolcus, in Thessaly, King Eson is overthrown by his power-hungry half-brother Peleus. Eson's young son, Jason, is the rightful heir, but to protect him from Peleus, he's sent away to be raised in secret by the wise centaur Chiron. Chiron was the ancient world's goated tutor for aspiring heroes. He also trained Achilles, Asclepius, and even Heracles for a bit. If you wanted your kid to learn archery, medicine, and how not to get eaten by a griffin, Chiron was your guy. Years later, Jason, now a strapping young man, decides it's time to reclaim his kingdom. An oracle had warned Peleus to beware the man wearing only one sandal. As Jason journeys to Iolcus, he helps an old woman cross a swollen river. In the process, he loses one of his sandals in the mud. This old woman, surprise, surprise, was none other than Hera in disguise, testing him. Jason, by helping her, earns her divine favor, which will be crucial later on. Hera, you see, had a long-standing grudge against Peleus because he had neglected to honor her in his sacrifices. The enemy of my enemy is my divinely assisted protege. Jason arrives in Iolcus, looking every bit the part of the prophesied one-sandal man. Peleus, seeing him and recalling the oracle, is understandably alarmed. He can't just kill Jason outright. That will be bad PR and might anger the gods. So he devises what he thinks is an impossible quest, a surefire way to get rid of this inconvenient claimant to the throne. He tells Jason he can have the kingdom if he brings back the golden fleece from the far-off land of Colchis at the eastern edge of the Black Sea. Now, the golden fleece wasn't just some fancy sheepskin rug. It was the fleece of a magical, flying ram with golden wool. This ram had originally been sent by Hermes, or Nephele, a cloud nymph, to rescue two children, Phrixus and Helle, from their evil stepmother Ino. As the ram flew them towards Colchis, Helle unfortunately lost her grip, fell off, and drowned in the strait that thereafter bore her name, the Hellespont, Sea of Helle. Phrixus made it safely to Colchis, where he was welcomed by King Itys. Phrixus sacrificed the ram to Zeus or Ares, and hung its golden fleece in a sacred grove, guarded by an ever-watchful, unsleeping dragon. So retrieving it was not going to be a simple sheep napping. Jason, ever the optimist, or perhaps just heroically naive, accepts the challenge. He sends out a call for heroes to join his expedition. And what a crew he assembles. This is the A-list of Bronze Age heroism. The ship itself, the Argo, is specially built by Argus. With Athena's help, naturally, she even incorporates a magical talking timber from the sacred oaks of Dodona into its prow, which could offer prophecies. And the crew, the Argonauts, are a who's who. Heracles himself signs up for part of the journey, though he gets sidetracked looking for his lost companion Hylas, who was lured away by water nymphs. There's Orpheus, the master musician, whose songs could charm rocks and trees, Castor and Pollux, the Dioscuri, Polydus as being an expert boxer, Zets and Calais, the winged sons of Boreas, the north wind, Peleus, future father of Achilles, Telamon, father of Ajax, Idmon and Mopsus, the seers, and many other renowned heroes. About 50 of them in total, a veritable super team. A mainstream historical fact. The story of the Argonauts may reflect early Greek voyages of exploration and trade into the Black Sea region, a historically resource-rich area known to the Greeks. Their journey is long and fraught with peril, a series of episodic adventures. They stop at Lemnos, an island populated only by women who had killed all their menfolk. Long story, involving Aphrodite and bad body odor. The Argonauts, repopulate the island before moving on. They battle the giant Gegans, 6-armed earthborn monsters. They rescue Phineus, a blind king and seer, who is being tormented by the Harpies, foul, bird-like creatures who snatch his food and befoul his table. Zets and Calais, with their wings, chase the Harpies away. In gratitude, Phineus gives them crucial advice for the next leg of their journey, including how to navigate the Symplegades, the clashing rocks. The Symplegades are two massive rocks that continuously crash together, crushing anything that tries to pass between them. Phineas tells Jason to release a dove first. If the dove makes it through, they can follow. The dove flies through, losing only a few tail feathers as the rocks smash together. The Argo, rowing with all its might and perhaps a timely push from Athena or Hera, makes it through as well, losing only a piece of its stern ornament. After the Argo passes, the Symplegades become fixed and never clash again. One less hazard for future Black Sea tourists. After many more adventures, they finally reach Colchis. King Aeetes is not exactly thrilled to see a shipload of heavily armed Greeks asking for his most prized possession. He agrees to let Jason have the fleece, but only if he can perform a series of impossible tasks. Yoke 2 fire-breathing bronze-hoofed bulls, created by Hephaestus, plow a field with them, and sow the field with dragon's teeth. And these aren't just any dragon's teeth. They are teeth from the dragon that Cadmus, founder of Thebes, had slain years before, and when sown, they sprout into an army of fully armed warriors. Aeetes is clearly hoping Jason will end up as a shish kebab, either from the bulls or the earthborn warriors. This is where Hera and Athena intervene again, playing divine matchmakers. They enlist the help of Aphrodite, who send her son Eros, this time the more familiar, mischievous archer version, to shoot an arrow of love into Medea, King Aeetes' daughter. Medea is a powerful sorceress, a priestess of Hecate, goddess of witchcraft. Struck by Eros's arrow, she falls madly in love with Jason and decides to help him, betraying her father and country for this handsome stranger. A recurring motif, isn't it? Remember Ariadne and Theseus? A quirky tidbit, Medea's name itself is related to words for cunning and medicine, reflecting her ambiguous nature as both healer and destroyer. Medea gives Jason a magical ointment that makes him fireproof and incredibly strong for a day. Using this, he yokes the fire-breathing bulls and plows the field. When the dragon's teeth are sown and the Spartoi, the sown men, spring up, Jason, following Medea's advice, which she got from Cadmus's experience, throws a stone among them. The warriors, confused, start fighting and killing each other until none are left. Jason has completed the tasks. Aeetes is furious and has no intention of handing over the fleece. He plans to burn the Argo and kill the Argonauts. Medea, realizing Jason is still in danger, leads him by night to the sacred grove where the golden fleece hangs, guarded by the sleepless dragon. Medea uses her magic, either a sleeping potion or spell, or perhaps Orpheus lulls it with his lyre to put the dragon to sleep. Jason snatches the fleece, and they race back to the Argo, with Medea joining them. The fleece is theirs. Mission accomplished. Well, not quite. Getting away from Colchis is another epic in itself. Aeetes, discovering the theft and his daughter's betrayal, sets off in pursuit. Medea, in a truly ruthless act to delay her father, takes her younger brother Absyrtus, who had either fled with her or was taken hostage, kills him, cuts his body into pieces, and scatters them in the sea. Aeetes, heartbroken, has to stop to gather his son's remains for burial, allowing the Argo to escape. It's a shockingly brutal act, highlighting Medea's formidable and terrifying nature. Historians still argue about Medea's character. Is she a victim of divine manipulation and Jason's ambition, or a monstrous figure driven by her own volatile passions? The answer is probably all of the above. The return journey is just as perilous, involving detours through various mythical landscapes, encounters with Circe, Medea's aunt, another powerful sorceress, who purifies them of Absyrtus's murder. Navigating past the sirens, Orpheus's music drowns out their deadly song. Scylla and Charybdis, Hera helps them through, and Talos, the giant bronze automaton who guards Crete. Medea defeats him by removing a bronze nail that seals his one vein. Finally, after many trials, Jason and the Argonauts return to Iolcus with the Golden Fleece. Jason presents it to Peleus. What happens next varies in different tellings. In the most famous version, Peleus still refuses to give up the throne. Medea then tricks Peleus' own daughters into killing him, promising she can rejuvenate him by boiling him in a cauldron with magic herbs. She demonstrates with an old ram, which emerges as a spry lamb. The daughters, eager to restore their father's youth, chop him up and boil him. Medea, of course, forgets the magic herbs. Peleus is well and truly stewed. Jason gets his kingdom, but often, due to the treachery involved in Peleus' death, he and Medea are driven out of Iolcus. Their later story, particularly in Corinth, involving betrayal and horrific revenge, is a tragedy for another time, famously dramatized by Euripides. The quest for the Golden Fleece, however, stands as a testament to teamwork, divine meddling, and the extraordinary lengths heroes and sorceresses in love will go to for a shiny, magical sheepskin, while heroes like Perseus, Heracles, Theseus, and Jason were out collecting monstrous souvenirs, fulfilling impossible-to-do lists, and generally making names for themselves across the Greek world. Another darker saga was unfolding, centered around the ancient and powerful city of Thebes. If the stories of the individual heroes often highlighted triumph over adversity, with a few tragic caveats, the tale of Thebes is a multi-generational epic of fate, prophecy, family curses, and a seemingly inescapable cycle of suffering. It's less hero's journey and more how many ways can one royal family mess things up. The founding of Thebes itself is steeped in myth. It begins with Europa, the Phoenician princess who was abducted by Zeus in the form of a bull and carried off to Crete, where she became the mother of King Minos. It's all connected. Europa's brother Cadmus was sent by their father to find her, with instructions not to return without her. An impossible task, given her divine abductor. After a long and fruitless search, Cadmus consulted the oracle at Delphi. The oracle told him to give up searching for Europa and instead to follow a special cow with a half-moon marking on its flank. Where this cow lay down, he was to found a city. Cadmus found the cow, followed it through Boeotia, and it eventually collapsed from weariness on the future side of Thebes. He decided to sacrifice the cow to Athena and send his companions to a nearby spring, the Spring of Ares, to fetch water. Bad idea. The spring was guarded by a fearsome serpent, or dragon, sacred to Ares, which killed most of Cadmus's men. Cadmus, enraged, fought and slew the serpent. Athena then appeared and told him to sow the serpent's teeth in the ground. When he did, fully armed warriors, the Spartoi-sown men, remember Jason also used some of these teeth, sprang from the earth. Cadmus, understandably alarmed, threw a stone among them, just like Jason would later be advised to do. The Spartoi, confused, began fighting each other until only 5 remained. These 5 survivors helped Cadmus build the Cadmea, the citadel of Thebes, and became the ancestors of the Theban nobility. However, by killing Ares' sacred serpent, Cadmus incurred the wrath of the war god. To atone, he had to serve Ares for 8 years. After this period of servitude, Ares was appeased, and Cadmus was given Harmonia, the daughter of Ares and Aphrodite, as his wife. Their wedding was a grand affair, attended by all the gods, who brought magnificent gifts. One of these gifts, however, would prove to be a source of immense trouble, a beautiful, divinely crafted necklace, often called the Necklace of Harmonia, made by Hephaestus. This necklace, though stunning, was cursed, destined to bring misfortune and disaster to whoever owned it. Hephaestus, you see, was still a bit bitter about Aphrodite's affair with Ares, so a cursed wedding present for their daughter was his idea of petty divine revenge. This necklace will pop up later, causing all sorts of problems. Cadmus and Harmonia ruled Thebes for a time, but their descendants were plagued by tragedy. One of their daughters was Semele, mother of Dionysus, who was tricked by a jealous Hera into asking to see Zeus in his true divine form, and was promptly incinerated, though Dionysus was saved. Another daughter, Agave, in a back-chic frenzy, induced by Dionysus, tore her own son, King Pentheus of Thebes, limb from limb because he had opposed the worship of the new god. You can see a pattern emerging: divine displeasure, tragic misunderstandings, and really, really bad family get-togethers. Generations later, the most famous and tragic chapter of Theban history unfolds with Laius, a descendant of Cadmus. Laius, king of Thebes, received an oracle from Delphi warning him that if he had a son, that son would kill him and marry his own mother. To avoid this fate, when his wife Jocasta bore him a son, Laius ordered the infant to be exposed on Mount Cithaeron, his ankles pierced and bound together, which is why he would later be called Oedipus, meaning swollen foot. He thought the baby would die from exposure or be eaten by wild animals. But, as with so many attempts to thwart prophecy, it backfired. The shepherd tasked with abandoning the baby couldn't bring himself to do it. He gave the infant to another shepherd from Corinth, who in turn gave him to the childless King Polybus and Queen Merope of Corinth. They raised Oedipus as their own son and heir, never telling him he was adopted. Years later, Oedipus, now a young man, heard a rumor at a banquet that he was not Polybus' true son. Troubled, he went to Delphi to ask the oracle about his parentage. The oracle didn't answer his question directly, but instead gave him a horrifying prophecy. He was fated to kill his father and marry his mother. Horrified, and believing Polybus and Merope were his real parents, Oedipus resolved never to return to Corinth, to avoid fulfilling this dreadful fate. As he journeyed away from Corinth, he came to a place where three roads met, the cleft way. Here, he encountered a chariot carrying an older nobleman, who rudely ordered Oedipus out of the way. A dispute arose over the right-of-way. Tempers flared, insults were exchanged, and it escalated into a fight. Oedipus, strong and quick to anger, killed the nobleman and most of his attendants. That nobleman, unbeknownst to Oedipus, was Laius, his biological father, king of Thebes, on his way to Delphi. The first part of the prophecy had been fulfilled. A mainstream historical fact: the Delphic oracle was immensely influential in the ancient Greek world, its pronouncements shaping political decisions, colonial ventures, and personal destinies for centuries. Oedipus continued on his journey and eventually arrived at the city of Thebes. He found the city in turmoil, terrorized by the Sphinx, a monstrous creature with the body of a lion, the wings of an eagle, and the head and breast of a woman. The Sphinx sat on a rock outside Thebes, posing a riddle to all who passed. If they couldn't answer it, she devoured them. The riddle was, what goes on 4 feet in the morning, 2 feet at noon, and 3 feet in the evening? Creon, Jocasta's brother and regent of Thebes since Laius's death, had proclaimed that whoever could solve the Sphinx's riddle and rid the city of her menace would become king and marry the widowed Queen Jocasta. Oedipus, confident and intelligent, faced the Sphinx and heard her riddle. He thought for a moment and then gave the correct answer: man who crawls on all fours as a baby, walks on 2 feet as an adult, and uses a staff a 3rd foot in old age. The Sphinx, defeated, threw herself from a rock and died. Thebes was saved. Oedipus was hailed as a hero, proclaimed king, and married Jocasta, his biological mother. The second part of the prophecy was now fulfilled, though no one in Thebes, least of all Oedipus or Jocasta, knew the horrifying truth. For many years, Oedipus ruled wisely and well, and he and Jocasta had 4 children: 2 sons, Eteocles and Polynices, and 2 daughters, Antigone and Ismene. But then a terrible plague fell upon Thebes. Crops failed, livestock died, children were stillborn. Desperate, Oedipus sent Creon to Delphi to find out the cause of the gods' displeasure. The oracle revealed that the plague was a divine punishment because the murderer of King Laius was still living in Thebes, unpunished. Oedipus, determined to find the killer and save his city, launched a zealous investigation, ironically pronouncing a curse upon a murderer, whoever he might be. Through a series of dramatic revelations involving the blind prophet Tiresias, who Oedipus initially accuses of being part of a conspiracy, a messenger from Corinth who comes to announce King Polybus' death from old age, initially relieving Oedipus, but then revealing Oedipus was adopted, and finally, the old shepherd who had saved him as a baby, the horrifying truth gradually comes to light. Oedipus realizes he is the son of Laius and Jocasta, that he killed his father at the crossroads, and that he has married his mother. Historians still argue about the extent of Oedipus's guilt. Was he a victim of an inescapable fate, or did his own character flaws, pride, anger, contribute to his downfall? Sophocles' play Oedipus Rex masterfully explores this tragic dilemma. When the truth is fully revealed, Jocasta, in despair, hangs herself. Oedipus, finding her, takes the golden brooches from her robe and blinds himself with them, crying out that his eyes should no longer see the horrors he has committed and suffered. He is then exiled from Thebes, a blind, cursed wanderer, accompanied only by his devoted daughter Antigone. A quirky tidbit, the Oedipus complex, a psychoanalytic term coined by Sigmund Freud, draws its name from this myth, though Freud's interpretation is a modern psychological lens applied to an ancient story about fate and divine law. The curse on the house of Laius, however, doesn't end there. Oedipus's sons, Eteocles and Polynices, agreed to share the kingship of Thebes, ruling in alternate years. But after Eteocles' first year, he refuses to step down. Polynices, exiled, gathers an army, the seven against Thebes, including famous heroes like Adrastus and Titius, to attack the city and claim his rightful share. The ensuing war is brutal. In the climactic battle, the two brothers, Eteocles and Polynices, meet in single combat and kill each other, fulfilling a curse Oedipus had laid upon them for their disrespect. Creon, now king again, decrees that Eteocles, who died defending Thebes, should be buried with full honors, but Polynices, as a traitor, should be left unburied, his body to be devoured by dogs and birds, a terrible fate in Greek belief. This sets the stage for the story of Antigone, who defies Creon's decree to give her brother a proper burial, leading to her own tragic end. Thebes, it seems, just couldn't catch a break. Its destiny woven from threads of prophecy, bloodshed, and inescapable family curses. After the doom and gloom that perpetually hung over Thebes, you might be craving a story with a bit more sparkle? Well, be careful what you wish for, because our next major event, the Trojan War, certainly has sparkle in the form of a golden apple, but it unleashes a veritable tsunami of trouble, affecting nearly every hero and kingdom in the Greek world. This isn't just a local squabble. It's the ancient world's equivalent of a world war, sparked by divine beauty contest, a spurn goddess, and the abduction or elopement, depending on your source, of the most beautiful woman in the world. It all starts, as many epic conflicts do, with a wedding. The wedding of Peleus, a mortal hero, and one of our Argonauts, remember him, and Thetis, a beautiful sea nymph and Nereid. This was a very prestigious match, and all the gods and goddesses were invited to the lavish celebration on Mount Pelion. All, that is, except for one Eris, the goddess of discord and strife. You can imagine Eris checking her celestial mailbox, finding no invitation, and thinking, "Oh, they're so going to regret this." And she was right. Not inviting the goddess of discord to your party is like begging for trouble. It's just bad event planning. Eris, naturally miffed at being snubbed, decides to crash the party in her own special way. She procures or creates a golden apple, inscribes on it the words Tau Eta Iota Kappa Alpha Lambda Iota Sigma Tau Eta Iota, T Callistii /Shim, meaning for the fairest or to the prettiest one, and casually rolls it among the guests at the wedding feast. Three powerful goddesses immediately lay claim to it. Hera, queen of the gods, wife of Zeus, representing stately power and majesty. Athena, goddess of wisdom, warfare, and crafts, representing strategic brilliance and skill. And Aphrodite, goddess of love, beauty, and desire, representing, well, irresistible allure. You can imagine this scene. The music stops. The ambrosia goes untasted. Three of the most influential goddesses are glaring at each other, each convinced the apple is rightfully hers. Zeus, who is present and probably just wants to get back to the wedding cake, is asked to judge. But he's far too clever or cowardly to get caught in the middle of that particular celestial catfight. He knows that whichever goddess he chooses, the other two will be furious with him. So he outsources the decision. He declares that the judgment must be made by a mortal, a young shepherd known for his fairness and good looks, who happens to be tending his flocks on Mount Ida near Troy. This shepherd is Paris, also known as Alexander. Now, Paris isn't just any shepherd. He's actually a prince of Troy, son of King Priam and Queen Hecuba. Before his birth, Hecuba had a dream that she gave birth to a flaming torch that set the entire city of Troy on fire. Soothsayers interpreted this to mean her unborn child would be the cause of Troy's destruction. To prevent this, Priam ordered the baby to be exposed on Mount Ida, another exposed royal baby. It's a surprisingly common trope. But, like Oedipus, Paris was saved by a kind shepherd who raised him as his own. So here he is, completely unaware of his royal lineage, about to make a decision that will seal the fate of his unknown city. Hermes, the messenger god, escorts the three goddesses, Hera, Athena, and Aphrodite, to Mount Ida and presents them to the bewildered Paris. He explains the situation. Here's a golden apple. Here are three goddesses. You pick the prettiest. No pressure. Each goddess, eager to win the coveted title and the apple, resorts to bribery, offering Paris a magnificent gift if he chooses her. Hera goes first. She promises him power, dominion over all of Asia, and vast riches. He could be the most powerful king in the world. Imagine that offer: continental supremacy, untold wealth. Tempting for sure. Then Athena steps up. She promises him wisdom and victory in battle. He would be renowned as the wisest of men and the greatest warrior, always triumphant. For a young man, the lure of glory and invincibility must have been strong. Finally, it's Aphrodite's turn. She, true to her domain, makes a much more personal and ultimately more alluring promise. She promises him the love of the most beautiful mortal woman in the world. Her name? Helen, daughter of Zeus. Remember the swan incident with Leda? And wife of Menelaus, king of Sparta. Paris, a young man more interested in love and beauty than in power or military glory, or perhaps he just really liked Aphrodite's presentation, makes his choice. He awards the golden apple to Aphrodite. And with that simple act, he seals his own fate, the fate of Troy, and the fate of countless Greeks and Trojans. Aphrodite is, of course, delighted. Hera and Athena, however, are incandescent with rage. They are spurned, insulted, and they vow eternal enmity towards Paris and his entire city Troy. This divine grudge will fuel the Trojan War more than any political or economic cause. A mainstream historical fact: the city of Troy, or Ilion, was a real place, located in modern-day Turkey. Archaeological excavations, most famously by Heinrich Schliemann in the 19th century, have revealed multiple layers of settlement, indicating a long and complex history, including periods of great wealth and destruction that align with the time frame of the mythical Trojan War around the late Bronze Age, circa 1200 BCE. Soon after the judgment, Paris's true identity as a Trojan prince is revealed, often through a recognition scene involving a childhood token or a prophetic sign at some games he attends in Troy. He is welcomed back to the royal family by Priam, despite those earlier ominous prophecies. Hecuba's flaming torch dream seems to be conveniently forgotten, or perhaps they hoped it wouldn't come true. Aphrodite, true to her word, now has to deliver Helen to Paris. She arranges for Paris to sail to Sparta on a diplomatic mission, or perhaps just a friendly visit. Menelaus, Helen's husband, receives Paris with all due hospitality. Xenia again, the sacred guest-host relationship. However, Menelaus then has to leave Sparta to attend his grandfather's funeral in Crete. This provides the perfect opportunity. While Menelaus is away, Paris, with Aphrodite smoothing the way and filling Helen's heart with desire, or perhaps just outright abducting her, accounts vary on Helen's willingness. Was she a victim or a willing adulteress? Historians and poets have debated this for centuries. Persuades Helen to leave Sparta with him and sail back to Troy, taking a good portion of Menelaus's treasure with him. When Menelaus returns to find his wife gone and his treasury looted, he is understandably furious. This isn't just a personal insult. It's a massive breach of Xenia, a violation of sacred hospitality, and an affront to his honor as a king. He immediately goes to his older, more powerful brother Agamemnon, king of Mycenae or Argos, who was the most influential ruler in Greece. Agamemnon, seeing an opportunity to unite the Greek kingdoms under his command and perhaps gain wealth and glory, and maybe even control of the lucrative trade routes Troy commanded, agrees to help his brother. They invoke a very important oath. Years earlier, when Helen, renowned for her unparalleled beauty, was of marriageable age, suitors had come from all over Greece seeking her hand. Her stepfather, Tyndareus, Leda's mortal husband, was worried that choosing one suitor would make enemies of all the others. The clever Odysseus, yes, that Odysseus, already making a name for himself with his cunning, proposed a solution. All the suitors should swear a solemn oath to defend the chosen husband against anyone who should quarrel with him or try to take Helen away. In return for this brilliant advice, Odysseus asked for the hand of Penelope, Tyndareus's niece. All the suitors, eager for a chance at Helen, swore the oath of Tyndareus. Menelaus was chosen, and now the time had come to call in those of use. Agamemnon sends messengers to all the kings and heroes who had taken that oath, summoning them to gather their armies and fleets at Aulis, to sail for Troy and bring Helen back, and to punish the Trojans for their outrageous act. A quirky tidbit: the face that launched 1,000 ships refers to Helen, and indeed a vast armada of Greek ships, traditionally numbered at over 1,000 in Homer's Iliad, would eventually assemble. The call to arms has been sounded. Heroes from all corners of Greece, including Achilles, Odysseus, Ajax, Diomedes, Nestor, and many more, will answer. The stage is set for a decade of brutal warfare, all because of a golden apple, a divine beauty pageant, and a runaway queen. The gods have chosen their sides, and the mortals are about to pay the price. The call to arms is echoed across the Greek city-states, thanks to the oath of Tyndareus and Agamemnon's political maneuvering or genuine brotherly support, depending on how cynical you are. A vast fleet, 1,000 ships strong if you believe Homer's epic catalog, gathers at the port of Aulis. You can almost smell the salt air, the sweat of anxious soldiers, the aroma of countless sacrificial fires lit to appease the gods and curry favor for the impending war. This isn't just a punitive expedition. It's the coalescing of an entire generation of Greek heroes, each with their own agenda, their own prowess, and their own destiny to fulfill or avoid on the plains of Troy. But getting this mighty armada launched is the first hurdle. Remember Agamemnon, leader of the expedition, who accidentally offended Artemis by killing her sacred deer and boasting about it. She's still holding that grudge, becalming the seas and preventing the fleet from sailing. The seer Calchas reveals that the only way to appease the goddess and get a fair wind is for Agamemnon to sacrifice his own daughter, Iphigenia. This is a horrific choice for Agamemnon, a stark illustration of how personal loyalties and paternal love often clash with the demands of the gods and the perceived needs of the state. In the most common version, Iphigenia is lured to Aulis under the pretext of marrying the great hero Achilles. At the last moment, just as she's about to be sacrificed, Artemis, perhaps moved by her innocence or simply having made her point, substitutes a deer on the altar and spirits Iphigenia away to become her priestess in Taurus. The winds shift, and the fleet can finally sail, but the psychic cost to Agamemnon and the dark shadow this act casts over his leadership will linger. The journey to Troy is not without incident, but eventually, the massive Greek fleet arrives and beaches their ships on the shores before the mighty walls of the city. The Trojans, led by their aged but noble king Priam, and with a formidable roster of heroes including Priam's brave son Hector, Paris's older brother, and a far more admirable figure, Aeneas, a son of Aphrodite, destined for greater things. Sarpedon and Glaucus are prepared for a siege. They are confident in their massive, divinely built walls. Remember Poseidon and Apollo's handiwork, even if Laomedon stiffed them on the pavement. What follows is not a quick victory. The siege of Troy lasts for 10 long, brutal years. 10 years of skirmishes, duels, raids on neighboring towns for supplies, failed assaults on the walls, and growing weariness on both sides. The Iliad, Homer's epic poem, doesn't cover all 10 years but focuses on a crucial few weeks in the final year, highlighting the rage of Achilles and its devastating consequences. This is a mainstream historical fact. The Iliad is one of the foundational texts of Western literature, offering profound insights into ancient Greek concepts of heroism, honor, fate, and the human condition, all set against the backdrop of this legendary war. The gods, naturally, are heavily involved, taking sides and directly intervening in the battles. Hera and Athena, still furious with Paris for that golden apple incident, are staunchly pro-Greek. Aphrodite, naturally, supports her favorite, Paris and the Trojans. Apollo also favors the Trojans, partly because Agamemnon had insulted his priest Chryses by refusing to ransom his captive daughter, Chryses, leading Apollo to send a plague upon the Greek camp. This is the event that kicks off the Iliad. Ares, god of war, fights on both sides at different times, wherever the fighting is thickest and bloodiest, sometimes getting wounded by mortals who are divinely aided, like Diomedes, who, with Athena's help, actually manages to spear Ares. Poseidon generally favors the Greeks, though he has a soft spot for Aeneas, whom he saves on one occasion. Zeus tries to remain neutral, or at least to ensure that fate unfolds as it should, but even he is swayed by pleas from other gods or his own sympathies. Mortals become pawns and champions in these divine power plays. The war sees incredible feats of heroism and devastating losses on both sides. Achilles, the greatest warrior of the Greeks, son of Peleus and Thetis, is nearly invincible, except for his famous heel, the one spot where his mother held him when she dipped him in the river Styx to make him immortal. He is swift, deadly, and terrifying in battle. However, he has a major falling out with Agamemnon over a captive woman, Briseis. Agamemnon, forced to return Chryses to her father to stop Apollo's plague, high-handedly takes Briseis from Achilles as compensation. Achilles, furious at this dishonor, withdraws from the fighting, taking his elite Myrmidon warriors with him. This is a disaster for the Greeks, as without Achilles, the Trojans, led by the valiant Hector, begin to gain the upper hand, even threatening to burn the Greek ships. Hector is Troy's greatest champion, a noble warrior, a loving husband to Andromache, and a devoted father to their son Astyanax. His scenes with his family in the Iliad provide some of the most poignant moments in the epic, contrasting the brutality of war with the tenderness of human relationships. He fights bravely to defend his city, even though he knows Troy is likely doomed, partly due to his brother Paris's folly. The absence of Achilles leads to many Greek deaths and desperate pleas for him to return. His dearest friend and companion, Patroclus, unable to bear seeing the Greeks so hard-pressed, persuades Achilles to let him wear Achilles' armor and lead the Myrmidons into battle to inspire the troops. Achilles agrees but warns Patroclus not to pursue the Trojans all the way to the city walls. Patroclus, caught up in the tide of battle and his initial success, forgets this warning. He drives the Trojans back, kills many, including Sarpedon, a son of Zeus, but is eventually stunned by Apollo, wounded by Euphorbus, and finally killed by Hector, who strips him of Achilles' armor. The death of Patroclus is the turning point. Achilles is consumed by grief and an overwhelming desire for revenge. His mother Thetis gets Hephaestus, the divine blacksmith, to forge him a new set of magnificent armor, including a shield intricately decorated with scenes of peace and war, life and death, a masterpiece of divine craftsmanship. Achilles returns to the battlefield, a terrifying force of destruction. He slaughters Trojans mercilessly, his rage so immense that the river Scamander, choked with corpses, rises up to fight him. Finally, Achilles confronts Hector outside the walls of Troy. Hector, despite his fear, stands his ground to defend his city. In a dramatic duel, Achilles, aided by Athena, who tricks Hector, kills him. But Achilles' rage is not sated. In a shocking act of desecration, he ties Hector's body to his chariot and drags it around the walls of Troy, and then back to the Greek camp, refusing to allow the Trojans to recover it for proper burial. This act appalls even some of the gods. Eventually, King Priam, guided by Hermes and protected by Zeus, makes a perilous night journey to Achilles' tent to ransom his son's body. Achilles, moved by the old king's grief and courage, and perhaps a reminder from the gods, relents. He allows Priam to take Hector's body back to Troy for a funeral. There is a temporary truce for the mourning. The war, however, is not over. Troy has lost its greatest defender, but the city still stands. Achilles himself will not live to see its fall. As prophesied, he is killed by Paris, yes, the pretty boy prince who started it all, who shoots an arrow guided by Apollo that strikes Achilles in his one vulnerable spot, his heel. A quirky tidbit, while Achilles' heel is a famous part of his myth, the Iliad itself doesn't explicitly mention this vulnerability or his death in this manner. It's detailed in later poems of the epic cycle. With both Achilles and Hector, the main champions, gone, the war drags on. The Greeks are despondent. But then the cunning Odysseus comes up with a plan, a stratagem so audacious it will become legendary, the Trojan horse. Under the guidance of Athena, the Greeks, led by the master craftsman Hippias, construct a giant hollow wooden horse. They fill its belly with a select group of their best warriors, including Odysseus, Menelaus, Diomedes, and Neoptolemus, Achilles' son, who has joined the war. Then the main Greek army burns their camp, boards their ships, and sails away, pretending to give up the siege and return home. They leave the giant horse standing on the beach as a supposed offering to Athena to ensure their safe voyage. The Trojans, waking to find the Greeks gone and this huge wooden horse left behind, are jubilant. The war is over. But what to do with the horse? Some, like the priest Laocoon, are suspicious. He famously warns, "I fear the Greeks, even when they bear gifts, Timeo Danaos et dona ferentes," /him, and hurls a spear into the horse's side. But then two giant sea serpents, sent by Poseidon or Apollo, who were pro-Trojan at this point, or perhaps just anti-Laocoon, emerge from the sea and devour Laocoon and his two sons. This is taken as a sign that Laocoon offended the gods and that the horse is sacred. Another Trojan, Sinon, a Greek captive, actually a plant, left behind by Odysseus to sell the story, spins a convincing tale that the horse is an offering to Athena, and if the Trojans bring it into their city, it will make Troy impregnable. Despite some lingering doubts, the Trojans, eager to believe their ordeal is over, make a breach in their own magnificent walls because the horse is too big for the gates, and drag the colossal wooden beast into the city. They celebrate their victory with feasting and revelry late into the night. Historians still argue whether the Trojan horse was a literal giant wooden horse, a metaphor for a type of siege engine, a clever earthquake-related ruse that damaged the walls, or simply a fantastic piece of storytelling. Whatever its reality, its mythic power is undeniable. Late that night, when Troy is asleep and drunk, Sinon releases the latch. The Greek warriors hidden inside the horse creep out, slaughter the sentries, and open the city gates to the main Greek army, which has silently sailed back under the cover of darkness. The sack of Troy begins. It is a night of unimaginable horror, slaughter, and destruction. King Priam is killed at the altar of Zeus by Neoptolemus. Astyanax, Hector's young son, is thrown from the city walls to his death, to prevent him from ever seeking revenge. The Trojan women are taken captive, enslaved, or killed. The city is looted and burned to the ground. Hecuba's dream of the flaming torch has come true in the most devastating way imaginable. Troy has fallen. The 10-year tussle is finally brutally over. The ashes of Troy are still smoldering, a grim testament to a decade of brutal warfare, divine meddling, and one very ill-advised piece of oversized equestrian woodwork. The victorious Greeks, laden with spoils and Trojan captives, including Queen Hecuba and the prophetess Cassandra, who is now Agamemnon's prize, prepare for their journeys home. You think after 10 years of fighting, they'd be looking forward to a smooth sail, a warm welcome, and putting their feet up. But this is Greek mythology, and smooth sail is rarely on the itinerary, especially when you've just thoroughly sacked a city, often with considerable impiety. Many of the returning heroes are about to find that the gods, particularly those whose temples were desecrated or whose favorites were harmed during the sack, have long memories and a penchant for punitive detours. Agamemnon, the leader of the Greeks, sails home to Mycenae, probably expecting a hero's welcome. Instead, he gets an axe. His wife Clytemnestra, sister of Helen, remember, has not forgiven him for sacrificing their daughter Iphigenia at Aulis all those years ago. Plus, during his decade-long absence, she has taken a lover, Aegisthus, Agamemnon's cousin, with his own family grievances against Agamemnon's father. Atreus, Theban-level family dysfunction wasn't limited to Thebes. Clytemnestra and Aegisthus plot Agamemnon's murder. When he arrives, she feigns a loving welcome, rolls out the metaphorical, and in some plays, literal red carpet, and then while he's vulnerable, perhaps in his bath, she and/or Aegisthus kill him. Cassandra, his Trojan captive, foresees her own death and Agamemnon's but is cursed never to be believed, so she meets her end there too. This ignites another cycle of revenge, with Agamemnon's son Orestes eventually avenging his father by killing Clytemnestra and Aegisthus, only to be pursued by the Erinyes, the Furies, those ancient goddesses of vengeance for kinslaying we met way back with Uranus's blood. Orestes' tale eventually ends with a trial in Athens, presided over by Athena, which establishes a new form of justice, but it's a bloody road to get there. Menelaus, who got his wife Helen back, Aphrodite having apparently switched her affections back, or Helen having a change of heart, has a rather long and storm-tossed journey home too. He and Helen are blown off course to Egypt and wander for several years before finally making it back to Sparta, where they apparently live out the rest of their days in relative, if perhaps slightly awkward, domesticity. Given everything, a few years of sightseeing in Egypt is getting off lightly. Other heroes meet various fates. Ajax the Lesser, not to be confused with Ajax the Greater, who killed himself in shame after losing the contest for Achilles' armor to Odysseus, rapes Cassandra in Athena's temple during the sack of Troy. This is a major sacrilege. Athena, enraged, enlists Poseidon's help to wreck his ship on the return journey. Ajax initially survives, clinging to a rock and boasting that even the gods can't kill him. Poseidon, hearing this hubris, promptly splits the rock with his trident, and Ajax drowns. Lesson: don't defile temples, and definitely don't taunt the gods when you're already on their bad side. But the most famous, most convoluted, and most monster-filled journey home is that of Odysseus, king of Ithaca. His 10-year struggle to return to his faithful wife Penelope and his son Telemachus, who was an infant when Odysseus left for Troy and is now a young man, is the subject of Homer's other great epic, the Odyssey. If the Iliad is about war and heroic rage, the Odyssey is about cunning, endurance, longing for home, and the many strange and wonderful and terrifying things you might encounter if you really annoy a sea god. Odysseus's troubles begin almost immediately. After leaving Troy, his fleet of 12 ships is blown off course. First, they raid Ismarus, land of the Cyclones, and get a bit carried away with pillaging. The Cyclones rally and drive them off with heavy losses. Not a great start. Then a storm sent by Zeus or perhaps Poseidon, already nursing a grudge that will soon become a full-blown vendetta, blows them far off course past Cythera for 9 days until they reach the land of the lotus eaters. Here, some of Odysseus's men eat the narcotic lotus fruit, which makes them forget all thoughts of home and duty, wanting only to stay and munch on lotus forever. Odysseus has to drag them back to the ships by force. You can imagine him. No, lads, we've got a queen to get back to, not a permanent fruit-induced haze. Next, they arrive at the land of the Cyclopes, one-eyed giants. Odysseus, ever curious and perhaps a bit too fond of reconnaissance by trespass, takes a detachment of men to explore a cave. The cave turns out to be the home of Polyphemus, a Cyclops son of Poseidon. Polyphemus returns, rolls a massive boulder across the cave entrance, trapping them inside, and then proceeds to eat 2 of Odysseus's men for dinner and 2 more for breakfast. Standard Cyclops hospitality, apparently. Odysseus, realizing brute force won't work against this giant, relies on his famous cunning. He gets Polyphemus drunk on some potent, unmixed wine he brought along. When the Cyclops asks his name, Odysseus cleverly replies, "My name is Nobody, Moody's/M in Greek." Once Polyphemus is passed out drunk, Odysseus and his men take a large olive. Stake, sharpen its end, heat it in the fire, and then ram it into the Cyclops' single eye, blinding him. Polyphemus roars in agony, and the other Cyclopes outside hear him and call out, "What's wrong, Polyphemus? Who is hurting you?" He cries back, "Nobody is hurting me. Nobody is killing me." So the other Cyclopes, thinking he's either mad or suffering from a divinely sent plague, go away. Classic. To escape the cave, Odysseus has his men lash themselves to the undersides of Polyphemus's giant sheep. When the blinded Cyclops lets his sheep out to pasture in the morning, feeling their backs to make sure no men are riding them, he doesn't detect the hidden Greeks. Odysseus himself clings to the belly of the largest ram. Once clear of the cave, they rush to their ships. As they are sailing away, Odysseus, in a moment of hubris that will cost him dearly, can't resist taunting the blinded Cyclops, revealing his true name. If anyone asks who blinded you, tell them it was Odysseus, sacker of cities, son of Laertes from Ithaca. Big mistake. Polyphemus, hearing this, prays to his father Poseidon for revenge, asking that Odysseus either never reach home, or if he must, that he arrive late in misery, having lost all his companions and find trouble in his house. Poseidon hears his son's prayer, and Odysseus's 10-year detour is officially upgraded to a divinely cursed nightmare. A quirky tidbit, the Mediterranean islands that claim to be the locations of Odysseus's adventures are numerous, each with local traditions linking them to the epic, showing how deeply the Odyssey permeated the cultural geography of the ancient world. His subsequent adventures are a catalog of wonders and terrors. He visits Aeolus, keeper of the winds, who gives him a bag containing all the contrary winds, leaving only the gentle west wind to blow him home. But his foolish crew, thinking the bag contains gold, open it when Ithaca is almost in sight, releasing all the winds and blowing them right back to Aeolus, who refuses to help them again, convinced they are cursed by the gods. They encounter the Laestrygonians, giant cannibals, who destroy 11 of Odysseus's 12 ships and eat their crews. Only Odysseus's ship escapes. He lands on the island of A, home to the beautiful sorceress Circe, daughter of Helios, and of Medea. It's a small world for sorceresses. Circe turns Odysseus's scouting party into pigs. Odysseus, with the help of Hermes, who gives him the magic herb moly to protect him from her spells, resists Circe's magic, forces her to restore his men, and then ends up staying with her as her lover for a year. She advises him that to get home, he must first journey to the underworld to consult the spirit of the blind prophet Tiresias. His trip to the underworld, the Nicaea, is a somber and pivotal episode. He speaks with Tiresias, who foretells his difficult journey home and the trouble awaiting him in Ithaca. He also meets the shades of many dead heroes and heroines, including his own mother, Achilles, who died of grief for him, Agamemnon, who warns him about treacherous women, Achilles, who famously says he'd rather be a poor serf on earth than king of all the dead, and Ajax the Greater, who still refuses to speak to him. A mainstream historical fact: beliefs about the afterlife were varied in ancient Greece, but Homer's depiction of a shadowy, joyless Hades was highly influential. Returning from the underworld, Odysseus and his men sail past the Sirens, whose enchanting song lures sailors to their deaths on the rocky shores. Following Circe's advice, Odysseus has his men plug their ears with beeswax and has himself tied tightly to the ship's mast so he can hear the Sirens' song but not be able to steer the ship towards them. He endures their irresistible call, a testament to his desire for knowledge and experience, even at great risk. They navigate the narrow strait between Scylla, a hideous six-headed monster who snatches sailors from their ships, and Charybdis, a giant whirlpool that sucks down entire vessels. They opt to sail closer to Scylla, losing 6 men, 1 for each head, rather than risk losing the entire ship to Charybdis. Then they land on Thrinacia, the island of Helios, the sun god, where his sacred cattle graze. Odysseus, warned by both Tiresias and Circe not to harm the cattle, makes his men swear an oath. But when they are stranded on the island for a month by unfavorable winds and their supplies run out, his starving crew, led by Eurylochus, slaughters and eats some of the sacred cattle while Odysseus is asleep. Helios is enraged and demands retribution from Zeus. When they finally set sail, Zeus smashes their ship with a thunderbolt. All the crew drown. Only Odysseus survives, clinging to a piece of wreckage. He drifts for 9 days, eventually washing ashore on the island of Ogygia, home to the beautiful nymph Calypso. Calypso falls in love with Odysseus and keeps him on her island, essentially as a pampered prisoner, for 7 long years, offering him immortality if he will stay and be her husband. But Odysseus longs only for Penelope and Ithaca. Eventually, Athena intervenes, persuading Zeus to order Calypso to release him. Calypso reluctantly helps him build a raft, and he sets sail once more alone, but Poseidon hasn't forgotten his grudge. He spots Odysseus on his raft and smashes it with a storm. Odysseus is shipwrecked again, but with the help of the sea nymph Leucothea, formerly Ino, the evil stepmother of Phrixus and Helle, she got a divine upgrade, who gives him her veil for protection. He finally washes ashore, naked and exhausted, on the island of Scheria, land of the Phaeacians. Here he is found by the princess Nausicaa, treated with great hospitality by her parents, King Alcinous and Queen Arete, and finally, after recounting his incredible story, which forms a large part of the Odyssey as a flashback, the Phaeacians provide him with a magical, swift ship that takes him home to Ithaca at last. He has lost all his men, all his ships, and 20 years of his life, 10 at Troy, 10 wandering. And his troubles, as Tiresias foretold, are not quite over yet. Odysseus, after that rather epic 20-year scenic route home, finally sets foot on the shores of Ithaca, delivered by the Phaeacians' magically swift ship while he's asleep. He doesn't even recognize his homeland at first, as Athena has shrouded it in mist, partly to protect him and partly, perhaps, because gods enjoy a dramatic reveal. He's a long way from the conquering hero who left Troy. He's a battered, world-weary survivor, alone and uncertain. The Phaeacians, by the way, pay a price for helping Odysseus. Poseidon, still miffed, turns their ship to stone as it returns to Scheria, a stark reminder that even good deeds can have divine repercussions. Athena appears to Odysseus, initially disguised, then reveals herself, and together they begin to plot his return to power. Ithaca, in his long absence, has gone downhill. His palace is overrun with a mob of arrogant suitors, all vying for Penelope's hand in marriage and, more importantly, for Odysseus's kingdom and wealth. These suitors, led by the particularly obnoxious Antinous and the smoother, more deceitful Eurymachus, are feasting day and night at Odysseus's expense, consuming his livestock, drinking his wine, and disrespecting his household and his son Telemachus. Telemachus, now a young man but lacking the authority to oust them, has recently returned from his own mini-odyssey, a journey to Pylos and Sparta, encouraged by Athena, to seek news of his long-lost father, an experience that helped him mature but didn't solve the suitor problem. Penelope, Odysseus's famously faithful wife, has been besieged by these suitors for years. She has resisted their advances with her own brand of cunning. Her most famous trick was the Shroud of Laertes. She told the suitors she would choose one of them once she finished weaving a burial shroud for her father-in-law, Laertes, who is still alive, but grieving in rustic seclusion. By day, she would weave, and every night, she would secretly unravel her day's work, thus delaying her decision for 3 years until a disloyal maidservant revealed her trick. Now the suitors are growing impatient, pressing her to choose. Athena disguises Odysseus as an old, ragged beggar, so he can enter his own palace unrecognized and assess the situation. He endures insults and abuse from the suitors, and even from some of his own disloyal servants. Only his old dog, Argus, recognizes him, thumping his tail in greeting before dying, having waited 20 years for his master's return. It's a heart-wrenching, quiet moment of loyalty amidst the chaos. His old nurse, Euryclea, also recognizes him while washing his feet by a distinctive scar on his thigh he received from a boar hunt in his youth. Odysseus sternly swears her to secrecy. The climax approaches. Penelope, perhaps prompted by Athena or by her own intuition that something is about to happen, or maybe just tired of darning that shroud, announces a contest for the suitors. She will marry whoever can string Odysseus's famously massive and stiff bow and then shoot an arrow through 12 axe heads lined up in a row. The exact nature of these axe heads, whether sockets or rings, is a matter of scholarly debate, but the feat is clearly one of extraordinary skill and strength, possible only for Odysseus. One by one, the suitors try to string the great bow. They warm it, grease it, strain with all their might, but none of them can even bend it enough to attach the string. They are humiliated, their claims to be Odysseus's equal proven false. Telemachus makes a show of trying and almost succeeds, perhaps a sign of his own growing strength, or Odysseus subtly signals him to stop, not wanting to reveal the plan too soon, but then defers. Then the disguised Odysseus, the old beggar, humbly asks for a chance to try the bow. The suitors mock him mercilessly. Antinous threatens to have him shipped off to a king who specializes in torturing beggars. But Penelope insists he be given a chance again, divine prompting or her own suspicion. Telemachus, asserting his authority, orders the bow to be given to the beggar. Odysseus takes the bow. He handles it expertly, like a musician with his lyre, checking it for wear. Effortlessly, he strings it. A thunderclap from Zeus echoes outside, a sign of divine approval. The suitors are stunned into silence. Odysseus then takes an arrow, sights carefully, and shoots it clean through all 12 axe heads. He has met the challenge. He then turns, another arrow nocked, and says something to the effect of, "Now for another target." His first shot hits Antinous, the lead suitor, in the throat as he's about to drink from a wine cup. Chaos erupts. Odysseus, with a cry of "You dogs," throws off his beggar's rags, revealing himself in his full, terrifying glory. Telemachus, who had earlier removed all the weapons from the hall except those for their small band of loyal retainers, like the swineherd Eumaeus and the cowherd Philoetius, joins his father. Athena is also present, sometimes deflecting the suitors' spears, sometimes egging Odysseus on. What follows is a brutal, bloody slaughter. The suitors, trapped in a hall without their weapons, are systematically killed. They plead, they try to fight back with stools and tables, but they are no match for Odysseus, Telemachus, and their few loyal men, backed by divine aid. The entire hall becomes a charnel house. The disloyal serving women, who had consorted with the suitors, are then rounded up and hanged. It's a grim, violent restoration of order. A mainstream historical fact, the concept of oikos, household, was central to ancient Greek society, and Odysseus's actions, however brutal, are depicted as a necessary reassertion of his authority over his oikos after it had been violated. After the slaughter, Odysseus is finally reunited with Penelope. But she is cautious, still unsure if this blood-soaked warrior is truly her long-lost husband, or perhaps a god in disguise or some trick. She tests him one last time. She orders Euryclea to move their marriage bed out of their bedchamber for him to sleep on. Odysseus is immediately indignant. He describes how their bed cannot be moved, because he himself built it around a living olive tree, its trunk forming one of the bedposts. This intimate detail, known only to Odysseus and Penelope, finally convinces her. They embrace, weeping, their long separation finally over. However, the relatives of the slain suitors are understandably angry and gather to seek revenge on Odysseus. Another battle is about to break out on Ithaca. But Athena, Zeus's command, intervenes decisively. She appears in her divine majesty and orders both sides to lay down their arms and live in peace. Awed by the goddess, peace is finally restored to Ithaca. Odysseus, after 20 long years, is truly home, his kingdom reclaimed, his family reunited. His journey, a testament to human endurance, cunning, and the enduring power of Nostos, homecoming, is complete. These myths, from the primordial chaos to the return of Odysseus, form a vast, interconnected tapestry. They explore the origins of the cosmos, the nature of the gods, the meaning of heroism, the struggles of humanity, the power of fate, and the eternal themes of love, war, betrayal, and redemption. They were more than just stories to the ancient Greeks. They were a way of understanding their world, their customs, their place in the universe. They provided a shared cultural language, a framework for morality, often through negative examples. Don't be like Zeus in that situation, and a source of endless inspiration for art, literature, and philosophy. A quirky tidbit for the end. Many constellations in the night sky, like Orion, Gemini, Castor and Pollux, and Corona Borealis, Ariadne's crown, were seen by the Greeks as celestial memorials to these mythical figures and their stories, forever written in the stars. The echoes of these tales, born in a world so different from our own, still resonate today, a testament to their enduring power and the timeless questions they explore about what it means to be human, and what it means to contend with forces larger than ourselves. And so, as the echoes of clashing swords and divine pronouncements fade into the quiet of the Ithacan night, as Odysseus finally finds his rest in the bed carved from a living olive tree, our own journey through the grand, sprawling, and often bewildering landscape of Greek mythology also draws to a close for tonight. The tales of gods and heroes, of monsters and magic, have woven themselves into the very fabric of Western culture, shaping our language, our art, our understanding of storytelling itself. These narratives, born from a desire to explain the inexplicable, to give order to a chaotic world, and to explore the deepest currents of human nature, have journeyed through millennia. They've been retold, reinterpreted, and reimagined countless times, yet their core elements, the passionate, flawed deities, the courageous, often tragic heroes, the eternal struggle between fate and free will, continue to captivate us. They remind us that even in a world of thunderbolts and prophecies, the challenges faced are often strikingly familiar. The pain of loss, the quest for identity, the longing for home, the difficult choices between duty and desire. As you drift now, let the images settle. Perhaps you see Prometheus, defiantly bringing fire to a shivering world, or Ariadne, her thread a lifeline in the terrifying dark. Maybe it's the vast wine-dark sea carrying Odysseus ever homeward, or the steadfast gaze of Penelope, weaving and unweaving her hope. These stories are more than just ancient entertainments. They are a mirror reflecting the complexities, the glories, and the follies of the human spirit, a spirit that, much like these myths, endures. Let the soft hum of your fan or the quiet stillness of your room Be the gentle lapping of waves on a distant shore, carrying these echoes into your dreams. Thank you for your attention. Goodbye and see you again in the next stories.